I kept having lucid dreams about my boyfriend cheating on me and it was causing me to freak out, until I found out he was actually cheating on me. I've been lucid dreaming for a while and traveled the world in my dreams. I even went to other worlds like Hogwarts. Last month, I went to sleep and began lucid dreaming as usual, only this time I unexpectedly showed up inside my boyfriend's bedroom. I assume my dream sent me here because I hadn't seen him in weeks. I jumped into his bed, just to find another girl under the covers cuddling with him. I ripped the sheets off of them and saw their naked bodies under it and my world came crashing down in an instant. I started hyperventilating because everything felt so real, as if my boyfriend was actually cheating at me. I was horrified, and forgot it wasn't even real, and I couldn't stop looking at the girl. I had never seen her before in real life. I would remember if I had met her because of her wild, blue hair. I wanted to wake up immediately because I couldn't handle the pain, but this horrible dream kept me there for what seemed like forever. I was in there for so long, just crying and staring at them, wondering why things turned out this way. Once I finally woke up, I immediately called my boyfriend. I told him about my dream and that my heart wouldn't stop beating rapidly, and then asked him if he was cheating on me with a girl with blue hair. He called me crazy, denied everything, and when I asked if he was sure, he called me insane for believing a dream over him. He made me feel ridiculous for having a dream where he was cheating on me. I believed him and apologized for accusing him without any proof, and we spent the rest of the day together. But it didn't end there. From then on, whenever I went into a lucid dream, I always appeared in his bedroom and had to watch him mingle with that same blue-haired girl. They were always doing something different, watching a movie, making out, or sleeping. I felt like an intruder even though that was my boyfriend and this was my dream. I was sure my dreams were trying to tell me he was cheating on me. Unfortunately, I couldn't even act on my suspicions because a month later, my boyfriend broke up with me over text, and he wouldn't tell me why. He just said things weren't working out with us and he had too much on his plate. I was heartbroken because this came out of nowhere and I thought my future was destroyed. 2 months passed after that, and when I was finally starting to forget about him after blocking his number and ghosting his friend group, my friend sent me an Instagram post followed by a message saying, "Isn't this your man?" When I saw the post, I was shocked. My ex was with the same blue-haired girl I had seen in that terrible dream. I did some investigating and found out her and my ex had the same date in their bio along with each other's initials. That date was more than 2 months ago, meaning they started dating while we were still together. I sent her a "hey girly" text telling her he was dating both of us at the same time, and she immediately asked for proof. Since I had deleted every trace of him from my life, I didn't have any actual proof to show her. After that, I stopped appearing in my ex's room whenever I was lucid dreaming and I started going into the world of Attack on Titan instead to trample my cheating ex-boyfriend 1.6 billion times. Edit. For everyone asking how I can lucid dream easily, I mix magnesium, L-theanine, glycine and apigenin into one drink to make a non-alcoholic cocktail. Basically, magnesium helps to get my brain to shut up and helps in not having creepy dreams. I never have sleep paralysis either and have never seen the infamous Hat Man people talk about. L-theanine relaxes me and allows me to fall asleep faster and dream longer. Taking glycine makes sure I never wake up tired in the morning no matter what crazy thing I do in my dreams, even though this is a problem for other people. And apigenin gets rid of my intrusive thoughts, which helps a lot when I'm thinking of what to dream of. I spent $120 on all of these ingredients because I saw a neuroscientist on YouTube named Andrew Huberman talking about the exact formulation to getting the best sleep. I have his formula down to a T, and spending over $100 is worth it if it means I can become a different person every night. After I drink my own cocktail, I lay down in bed and repeat mantras to myself like, "I will lucid dream." 15 minutes later, I open my eyes to a whole new world and live out my fantasies.
My fiancé yelled at me for having a VJJ in my textbook. I'm a literal med student. My fiancée Annie and I have known each other since we were children and began dating junior year of high school. After high school, we both went to our state school and I asked her to marry me junior year of undergrad. I have always dreamt of being a doctor, as has she. When the application process began, I applied to a good mix of MD and DO schools of varying degrees of selectivity, though all med schools are insanely selective. I had initially planned on continuing my education in my state institution because I did not want to take on too much debt. I did end up getting into my state school's med school, but I was also unexpectedly offered a spot at one of the best med schools in the country, i.e. top 3, in New England. We are from the West Coast. I would have been inclined to reject the offer had I not also qualified for a partial, but still significant scholarship. Annie, despite pleas from myself, our parents, professors, advisors, etc. applied to only our state school and to some insanely selective, top 10 MD, schools, that she, to be blunt, had no chance of getting into given her admittedly mediocre grades and research experience. She was rejected from all the schools she applied to, including our state institution. Obviously, this crushed her, and I have tried my best to support her during a difficult time and to help her remain optimistic. Our situation now is this: I am currently enrolled at the aforementioned New England Medical School, while Annie has decided to take a year off to strengthen her profile with research experience, physician shadowing, etc., and is currently living with me. There were no jobs open related to her undergrad major, political science, here or in our home state, that would be able to give her sufficient time off for research, so she is currently working part-time in the retail industry. I have tried my best to be completely supportive of her, as I know that this is a difficult time for her, and I have never, ever said "I told you so" or anything along those lines. This is what ended up happening on Friday night. I was home, studying for a test on Monday when Annie came home from work. She came over to my desk and kissed me. I asked her how her day went and she didn't respond, and suddenly looked very pissed off. After a few moments, she said, "What the EFF is wrong with you?" while pointing at an anatomical diagram of a vajayjay in my textbook. I was speechless. After regaining my composure, I managed to let out a surprised, "What do you mean?" "I'm studying," to which she said something along the lines of, "You know what the F I mean, why the F are you looking at pictures of women's vajayjay?" This was very strange because she knows I occasionally watch corn and has no problem with it. In fact, I know that she enjoys corn from time to time as well. I explained to her that I had to take anatomy in medical school, but she wasn't having it. She took my textbook and stormed off to our bedroom and locked the door. I could hear her crying, and I kept apologizing. After a few minutes, she opened the door and threw her engagement ring at me before slamming it shut again to continue crying. I continued apologizing, but she did not respond at all. I spent the rest of the night on the couch. Saturday morning, she wasn't home. I checked my phone and there was a text from her saying that she was staying with a friend and that she was done with us unless I dropped out of medical school and found another job because, and this is honest God text from her, she doesn't want me ogling at vajayjay like an effing perv. This is completely out of character for her. She has always been level-headed and reasonable and has no history of mental illness or anything like that. I am not a stupid person and I know that this is way more to do than a picture of a kitty in an anatomy textbook, but I have no idea what to do. Right now. She has stopped responding to texts and won't pick up her phone. I spoke to the friend she's staying with who basically called me a fucking asshole and said that Annie is crying and getting drunk and that neither of them want me coming over to speak with her. Her parents passed when we were young children and she doesn't have any siblings or much other family. I have no idea what to do anymore. I love her more than anything, but there is absolutely no way I am dropping out of medical school for her, and I would rather we break up than bend to her completely unreasonable demands, but I am very concerned for her mental health right now and need any advice I can get. My fiancé yelled at me for having a vajayjay in my textbook. I'll save you the trouble, she wasn't cheating nor was she pregnant. Yesterday I decided that enough was enough and I headed over to where she was staying intent on ending the relationship. When I got there she was half drunk. What followed was a lot of screaming and cussing directed at me. I learned why she wanted me to drop out. It had nothing to do with textbook vaginas. When I was a sophomore, two of my friends dropped out of college to work on their tech startup full-time and invited me to come work with them. My undergrad degree was in comp sci. I rejected the offer because I wanted to concentrate on my dream of becoming a doctor. Fortunately, their startup did very well and last year they sold it to a large tech company for a very large sum of money, in the low 8 figures. I was thrilled for them. After they sold the company, both of them obviously had large lifestyle changes. One of them proposed to his girlfriend with a ridiculously fucking big diamond, and they are frequently vacationing in exotic locations with family and SOs. Apparently, their success and lifestyles made my girlfriend extremely jealous, and she came up with the vagina thing as a way for me to drop out of med school because she thinks that I can easily get a job making $150K a year at a bank so we wouldn't have to live like fucking refugees and that I am a fucking idiot for not doing so. Still, I was confused. I asked her about our dreams of being doctors. Turns out she never really wanted to go into medicine but only claimed to because it was all I ever talked about. I guess that explains her application strategy. I was done. I broke up with her on the spot and told her not to contact me again. She is going to continue staying with her friend while we figure out a living arrangement. Update, neighbor says she saw my husband cheating. I can't describe how relieved I am. I'm still crying for some reason. I downloaded the app and logged in. Rightfully so, most of you said that the footage would probably be deleted for that day. However, it was still there, because there was nothing to hide. At around 11:06 a.m. on July 7th, you see my husband pull into our driveway. He exits the vehicle alone. There was no blonde. The only other car that comes to our house is mine at 3:50 p.m. I want to update you guys on what happens with the neighbor, but I think I'm going to delete this account. I am so disgusted. I don't know why she would lie to me like that. I'm disappointed in myself for doubting my husband, and I hope he doesn't get angry with me for not trusting him. 4 hours later, most people won't read this but I just want to put it here. My husband has been worried since last evening since that was when I started ignoring him, and he said that he will get it out of me eventually. Today he has called and texted me numerous times between his meetings to check in on me, but I ignored everything. When I randomly asked for the login, I guess he got even more worried. An hour and a half ago he just decided to say duck it and come home even though he still had work to do. I was so scared that he would be mad. When he came home he was visibly angry and worried. I just told him the truth. I know I wasn't supposed to. Many people said to lie about it, but I just couldn't. I then apologized for not trusting him. He wasn't even angry anymore, he just looked hurt and sad. He said that he could never be angry with me for that and he will deal with the neighbor. Thinking about the neighbor seemed to really make him angry though. He said I should eat something but I told him I didn't feel like it. He then asked me if I had slept at all last night and I said no. So even though it's 7:30 p.m. I'm in his arms and in bed, I'm finally going to sleep soon. I just wanted to update, since a couple people thought he would leave me. Other than cheating, what secret do you keep from your so to prevent upsetting them? The first Christmas after I got together with my partner, he brought me a beautiful opal necklace. He knew it was my favorite stone. I suspect he paid quite a bit. He's mad proud of the thing and loves to see me wear it. He told me that when he brought it he paid for a slightly smaller opal, and the shop worker accidentally grabbed the wrong one so he got an upgrade to a bigger opal for free. My partner also has a whole thing against fake stones in jewelry, thinks it tacky, horrible, dishonest, etc. Long story short, what he doesn't realize is that my beautiful opal is fake. See, I suspect he paid for a real opal, but he probably wasn't meant to see that when the shop worker grabbed the bigger one. I suspect they ran a little con on him, charged him for a smaller real one and grabbed the larger fake instead. He thought the accident was in his favor so he never complained. I only know one. The play of color and size in the opal I have would have cost a small house deposit if it had been real, and there is no way he brought that as a uni student when we first go together. And two, a real opal would never have stood up to the wear and tear I have put it though. I literally never take it off. It comes for me on runs, in the salt water, in the shower, etc. All things that would have destroyed a real opal many years ago. 3. A friend brought a pair of earrings that matched my necklace, not on purpose, and she confirmed that my necklace and her earrings made up the store's imitation opal birthstone set. I love that effing stone. I don't wear much jewelry, but I haven't taken that necklace off in 3 years. I have literally told him that if we get married one day, I'm having the thing pulled off the necklace and set into a ring. That's gonna be an awkward conversation with a jeweler. If I told him, he'd probably feel really bad about it and want to get me a replacement. But I love the stupid thing, so I won't tell.
Refuse to hire me because I'm fat? My new place will run you out of business. I'm a stripper and my body type is slim thick, which means I'm not as skinny as most people in this industry. However, when I work the pole, I'm a beast. My build comes from muscle, not fat, and I'm way stronger and more flexible than most girls who work in strip clubs. But when I was still looking for a job, I applied to this one place, Elites, that refused to hire me because of my weight. The manager told me, "Come back after you lose 10 pounds, lard lover. I'm not going to waste club money on a fatty like you." And I took that personally, word to MJ. I got hired pretty easily at another club that same day, but here's the thing, I work at strip clubs to pay my college fees. And in college, I'm in the business school. So, after a few conversations with my new manager, he agreed to let me double as a stripper in the more profitable hours of the night while working as a floor manager at other times so I could get some actual business experience for my resume. In the hours when I worked as a floor manager, I worked hard. I compartmentalized our drinks log, figured out which were our biggest and smallest sellers and changed the prices accordingly. I connected with the guy who runs our social media account and gave him a posting schedule. And I had our hostess move further away so she could actually direct new traffic to the club instead of just guiding people who were already planning on going inside. The result? The Elites manager who once refused to even give me a job has reached out to my new manager, asking if our club was interested in doing dual events because our business has been booming so much that it's starting to run Elites out of business. My manager was considering it until I told him the full story, and then he graciously and snappishly declined their offer. Now, 3 months later, Elites is out of business. I've moved into being a floor manager full-time, and it's looking like I'll graduate debt-free thanks to my partial scholarship and increased income, so take that, Elites. Looks like I never needed you anyway.
I had a one-night fling with my new boss's then husband. I ended up quitting rather than working for her. I appreciated your response and all of the kind responses in the comments, but there was no way I could work for her when the company had clearly sided with her right off the bat, and when she still had it out for me after all this time. Before she started her management position, she was here for a meeting. She saw me by the elevators and said the universe must be on her side since she was offered a chance to manage one of the people who had shattered her life before. There were no witnesses to this conversation and I knew then I had to get out before she took over. I wish I could say I have found another job and everything is great, but that is unfortunately not the case. I had to move in with my mom and dad. I'm working as a temp until I can find a permanent full-time job. I did have an interview, but the hiring manager saw red flags when I was unable to provide a current reference from either job I have had in the past, the one where I worked with the father of my child and the one I just quit, and only had a single reference for 12 years of work in the form of my now retired former manager. They ultimately decided to go with another candidate. Another company I applied to decided not to move forward with my candidacy after they called both of the companies I had worked at in the past even though I didn't have any references from either one. I don't know what they were told, but I imagine it cannot be good as I have no friends at either place and did not leave on good terms. The father of my child is also working temp jobs. He has had a tough time finding work since his divorce. He is also living with his mom and dad. Neither of us has a car, I cannot afford it and his ex-wife got his in the divorce, so we rely on public transportation or our parents. Things have always been amicable between us, we have always shared custody with no child support because of the equal time, but for now our child stays with whichever one of us or our parents/other relatives are available for childcare and we try to help each other financially as much as possible so our child isn't affected. He is still dealing with the fallout from his bankruptcy and his ex-wife having his wages garnished instead of accepting a payment plan. Both of us are focused on getting back on our feet and giving our child a stable life. I'm thankful we both have family who helps whenever they can. Even though things aren't going great at the moment, I still want to thank you for your response and the perspective you provided and all of the people in the comments who were kind and supportive. I go back and reread them whenever I'm having a really bad day. What are some apps you can't live without? Wakey. Social alarm clock. The other day I got woken up by a very intoxicated sounding Russian guy, apparently in a loud bar. I don't think he knew how to say anything other than wake up in English. Last night, I tried waking someone up, and he just started screaming into the phone. This crap is priceless. McTube. It's YouTube that keeps playing after you lock the screen. If this then that, it's an interesting app that uses triggers online to automatically take action for you. Huge functionality. A couple examples are that I have mine set up to save any picture I'm tagged in on Facebook into a Dropbox folder. Takes my phone off of silent when I connect to my home Wi-Fi. Backs up contacts into a Google Docs spreadsheet. Really useful, and I love that it does busy work for me. Fast customer. It calls customer service, navigates the phone tree, saves a place in line, and then calls you when there's a real person to talk to. Safe Trek. Turn the app on whenever you don't feel safe. You keep your finger on the button the entire time until you're at a safe location. As soon as you take your finger off, you have about 5 seconds to enter your 4-digit password. If you don't enter it, then the police are called and given your location. It's amazing, and I use it a lot. It's only $2, but for some reason, it was free when I downloaded it, so it may go on sale sometimes. Everyone should have it. MyFitnessPal, MFP. If you are trying to track your weight at all, this is the app for you. Search any food or drink from eating out to homemade recipes, and almost always you'll be able to log it. With the help of this app, and the 50 Reddit friends I added on it, I lost 35 pounds this summer. Highly recommended. Cam Scanner, for making quality scan PDF style docs on the road. It saved my life for final season. For the ladies, period tracker. I have the light version, but it's awesome. You tap a button when your period starts, and you can input symptoms, heaviness of flow, etc. You tap the button again when your period ends, and it pulls up graphs, charts, and a calendar that track your period. It'll even give you a day's notice the day before. No more counting days. The light version is free. Duolingo is fantastic. Bite size, game style language learning, short modules with heart/hit points for errors, experience and level ups. The app version has Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, German, French, and Dutch, and the full website has more, with new languages being added all the time. There's a risk of being abducted by a huge green bird, but it's worth it.
8 for throwing my rings in the ocean after my husband told me he had an affair, even though it was a prank. This is the dumbest thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. This past Sunday, my husband and I were on our boat together. We were just relaxing and talking and having a good morning. All of a sudden, my husband gets really serious and tells me, "Baby, I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you something. I'm so sorry, please forgive me, I had an affair." For context, my husband thinks he's a comedian. He says dumb poop all the time, but he's never joked about our marriage or relationship or cheating, ever. The way he said it, I fully believed him. I was blinded by rage and hurt, and I'm not a confrontational person at all, so all I did was stand up, take my rings off, and throw them into the ocean. I don't even know why I did it. It was just the first thing I thought of doing. My husband's jaw hit the floor. He immediately started to yell at me that it was a joke, a prank, he wasn't serious and I was an idiot. My jaw dropped then too. I yelled at him too and called him the same. I cried too, realizing I just thrown my lovely and sentimental rings into the ocean. We've been arguing for days. He says I'm TA. I say he's the TA, and I have no idea who's right. Yes, admittedly I threw about 10K worth of rings into the ocean and we will never find them again, but he looked me in my eyes and told me he had an affair. I am upset about my rings. I've apologized for throwing them, but I just don't feel like TA.
My aunt got pregnant with my child when I was 16, and my mom had no idea. 8 years later, she found out and was kicking me out. So I, 24, have had my life flipped around. My mom was 10, and her sister, who I'll now call my aunt, was 14 when they immigrated from Taiwan. My mom got into a lot of trouble, and she and my dad were both 14 when she got pregnant. My grandparents didn't let her get rid of me, so I ended up being born. I was close to my mom until I was about 8, and then she just started partying, hanging out with friends, and arguing with my grandparents all the time. There were a few times when she just took me after an argument and kept me away for a month or had my dad keep me. It continued like that until I was 13 and my grandparents passed away. My aunt's engagement collapsed, and she moved in to help my mom. That's when my aunt started grooming me, and it messed me up. My grades dropped. I started screaming at mom and blaming how she used to act for my actions. I got into fights at school, and I was so afraid of my aunt, to the point where I'd start cuddling with my mom all night just to stay away from her. When I was 16, my aunt got pregnant, and she moved away with a friend. Like, a week later. She came over once after the baby David was born. And when my mom went out for a little bit, she made me hold him and took a photo of us, saying I should hold my son while I can. Then she moved with David to Taiwan and started living with a cousin. I've tried to forget everything she did to me. I graduated with honors and got a wonderful job. I've tried to make my mom proud. I just got her a car. She calls my fiancée the daughter she never had. My fiancée is the only one I've ever opened up to because I had to let her know. Apparently, last Monday, my aunt had one too many drinks and told the cousin everything she did to me and about me being David's father. She got kicked out right away, and my mom was told everything by the cousin. My mom had a breakdown and asked me if she was really so horrible that I couldn't tell her this happened to me. She yelled that she would have been able to help, but because I didn't know, her grandson is stuck with a monster. She kicked me out, saying I must have never forgiven her for how she used to act. I've talked to my fiancée about it, and she said my mom just needs time and can't fathom the idea that she has a grandson she can't help. Was I wrong? To never tell her. Update 1: It has been a rough month and a bit since I last posted. The day after my post, my mom called me back home and said we needed to talk. When I came back and sat down on the couch to talk, she just started crying. So I started crying, too. She calmed down first, but I kept crying. And it's embarrassing to write, but I fell asleep. My mom woke me up, and we had to talk about things. I told my mom how, because of how provocative my aunt was and how other kids would tease me whenever they'd see her, I was so confused when things were happening, and I was trying to push it all down and away. She even brought up how she should have known something was wrong because no kid at that age should cuddle with her mom all through the night, but she was too wrapped up in trying to have fun to notice. And then, I don't know, I tried to tell her how much I've worked to make her proud. She told me that she's always been proud, and I'm proof that she didn't end up being a waste of space like her parents always called her. I'm her entire life. And then she admitted that she called my aunt the night before. She told me that even though she wanted to be sly with things to find out about David, my aunt knew why she was calling. It turns out after my cousin kicked her out, my aunt moved into a hotel room because she couldn't afford an apartment. My mom offered to pay for that apartment on the condition that she sends David to her, and my aunt agreed. My mom told me that she wishes she could send my aunt to jail so she could suffer, but she won't fail her grandson like she failed me. So she had to bring him. He came a week after, and my aunt did not come with him. She sent him on the plane with a relative who didn't know what was up and left the day after to visit other people. He was really quiet and confused, and my mom took him around everywhere, trying to get full custody of him right away. I don't know anything about this legal stuff or how he was even allowed to come with a guardian, but my mom has told me not to worry about it and that she's handling it. He did refer to my mom as his aunt when he came, but as soon as our relative left, she made him start calling her grandma. As weird as it's been, he's also been calling me dad. He seemed uncomfortable with it at first, but he's kind of gotten used to it. My mom has loved being a grandma, and David is already really attached to her. I know it's only been a little bit since he came, but it reminds me of myself at that age with how I used to cling to her. She has introduced him to all her close friends. Whenever they ask about his mom, she just says that she's in Taiwan and sends him over for a better life with us. Since I'm getting married. Yesterday, my mom talked with me and pointed out some strange stuff with David that she's noticed, and expressed her belief that my aunt was starting to do to him what she had done to me. I don't really know what to do with that info. My fiancé has told me. I just need to keep handling it like I'm doing and stay confident. I'm doing my best, but with how things have been, I don't know if it's good enough. That said, I do feel like I'm mentally better knowing my fiancé is good, with my mom taking in David, and my mom and I clearing things up about what my aunt did. Update 2: I don't really think I'm going to keep doing these. Maybe I'll go one way into the future if I feel like it. But I felt I needed to give another update because I got a lot of messages about my aunt, and I felt I needed to get some things off my chest. I do wish things were different and I wasn't in this situation, but I am in it, and I have to see the good because the bad can be too much. I know some people would love it if I made this update about going on Facebook or Twitter and blasting my head on it and the police in Taiwan locking her away for life. But it's not. It's hard to write or talk about her outside of something which I know is private like this. And if I had to think, that's because I still feel guilty and conflicted and almost wonder if I deserved it or if I wanted it, even though I know that's not true. I hope that she lives a terrible life, but what's best for me is staying separate from her forever, and I won't be doing anything to associate with her again. A lot of people had an issue with my mom forcing David to call me dad or father while taking the title of grandma. And I won't lie, it is weird and uncomfortable, especially because I don't feel like a father, and I don't even know what that means. But it's not making me feel sad or mad or anything, just a little offbeat. And I don't think it's anything to be angry over. As for the rest of it, my mom officially has custody of David. I don't know how the process went. I don't know how it happened so fast, or if it was even fast. I do know she did get sent documents from my aunt's lawyer in Taiwan, but she's kept me uninvolved to avoid stressing me. The thing is that one day, David said something about his mom needing him to make babies. My mom honestly cried harder than she ever has that night. And when I went to her, she just kept crying, hugging me and saying she's sorry. I do hope that David will snap out of it soon. He does like seeing the child psychologist my mom takes him to. She's gotten David into school, but because of his situation, they have meetings with a school district psychologist. She's got him a translator because his English isn't that good. And apparently the school's resource team is setting up something called an IEP. As for David himself, it's weird that he misses his mom, but he does. I understand missing Taiwan and being scared of a new place, but I don't know why he misses her, especially since she was doing that to him. He has become really attached to my mother, and she loves being a grandma. She joked to me one day that the best thing is that nobody at work flirts with her anymore because she's a grandma. I guess the line for some guys is that she's a grandma. Before she's 40, she takes him to the temple, the park, loves cooking traditional food for him, and always speaks in Mandarin with him. She even went out and bought a lot of parenting books and signed up for a class to make sure she can do it right. Even when it gets tough. Our interactions have been limited, and I think he's scared of me. But my mom has told me over and over again that it's all right and I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. I did ask her why she's not forcing me to be more involved, and she just said she feels it'd be wrong to force me. Another thing that happened is that my father found out about David. My father's not really in my life. He has his own wife and kids, and he's focused on them. I'm an adult now, so I'm at peace with what our relationship is. Honestly, this was the first time in months I talked to him. And before that, it was last year when he updated his will because he decided he wanted me to be the one to inherit his car. Apparently, one of my mom's friends let him know about David, and he showed up unannounced with his kids, making them carry 2 crates full of toys while himself holding a new Xbox. Much more than he's ever got from me. He talked to my mom about everything while his kids played with David. And I won't lie, I felt jealous of them because it seems like being an uncle and aunt is easier than being whatever I am. But when my dad talked to me that day, we were alone in my room and he cried too. Because he never wanted me to be a dad as early as him, and it was weird seeing him cry or be affectionate with me. My mom and dad did take David out to the park that day and he honestly had so much fun with them. I saw them come home and he was walking between them, my mom holding his left hand and my dad holding his right hand, and they seemed to be having so much fun. It was almost like that could have been us if the timing was right. And that did feel really sweet. My mom has let my dad take David to his house a few times as well, and he started calling my dad's wife Debbie, which is weird because she's more Chinese than my mom is. They still call me on FaceTime just to talk with him, and my dad has come a few times since then because they want to see their nephew. My mom is going to go with my dad's family on Halloween because they all want to take David out. The best thing for me, though, has been my fiancée. I guess I never really understood the term that she's my rock before this, but I get it now. My mom gets it too and has me call her when everything starts to get uncomfortable. And I get why she calls me when she's in a similar place. Her family has been amazing and understanding too. They've got a very sanitized version of what happened to me, just like my mom. But they've all been so great to me. It's weird, because it's like I got the one finance whose family treats me well despite it. And I won't lie. Her parents are very traditionally Chinese, and I was scared they wouldn't keep approving of me. But her grandfather gave me a hug. So I am in a better place. And my fiancé is probably the biggest reason why. Thanks to my TED Talk. What's a good name for a boat to imply you have cocaine on board? Yo, check this out. I was out cruising on my boat the other day, trying to soak up some sun and chill out. I mean, that's what the ocean's all about, chilling out and getting away from the bullshit of everyday life. But then poop got real fast. I don't know what the F was going on, but I swear to God I heard gunshots in the distance. That was bad enough, but then this speedboat comes roaring up beside me, all black and sleek, like something out of a motherfucking action movie. My heart was pounding in my chest as these three guys scrambled onto my boat. They were all decked out in black, with those creepy butt ski masks covering their faces. Fucking hell, I thought I was about to be taken hostage or some poop. But then I heard one of them whisper to another about how they had a ton of coke on board and needed to stash it somewhere before the cops showed up. I don't even know how to explain the adrenaline rush that flooded through me when I heard those words. I knew I should have been scared, but honestly, all I could think about was how much money I could make off of this situation. I mean, F all that moral bullshit, I was talking about some serious cash here. So I offered up my own boat as a hiding spot for them, and they were so grateful they practically threw the bags of coke at me. I couldn't believe what was happening. I was involved in some effing substance deal. As soon as the other boat disappeared around the bend, I took off like a bat out of hell, but I couldn't get those bags of coke off my mind. I mean, I couldn't just let all that profit go to waste. Long story short, I ended up selling all of that poop on the black market, and made more money in one night than I had in my entire life. And what's even better is that I didn't get caught, not by the cops, not by any of the shady people I dealt with. So yeah, I guess you could say I'm effing criminal now, but honestly, that adrenaline rush was totally worth it.
People who have cheated on their partners, why? I was in the army. I married a girl from my hometown. She kept cheating on me and accusing me of cheating. It must have gone on for 4 separate guys before I finally cheated on her. The reason I did it was I felt like a fool being faithful to someone who obviously didn't care about how I felt. Even then when I did it, I had a stomachache and did not feel any less of a fool. In fact, I felt like a bigger one. I felt empty and hollow. It was when I was overseas in Korea attempting to fix things that she had a friend over while we were FaceTiming. Her replies were cold and unwelcoming even though we had agreed to work it out. She kept looking over the device and smugly smiling at someone. I was done, over it. I didn't speak to her again until the divorce hearing, a lesson well learned. My first GF cheated on me. I gave her a second try. She cheated again. We broke up. Few months later I got a new GF. She cheated on me. We broke up. Few months later I got another GF and the guy she cheated on me with told me before she told me. At this point I was just effing pissed at how often people were cheating on me, so I went out, met a random girl, we kissed, I stopped, called my cheating GF and broke up with her. If it ever turns out we're inside a simulation, what makes it kind of obvious in hindsight? The universal speed limit being so low that almost none of the universe needs to be simulated in any real detail. Everyone having the same conversations over and over. How fake the sky looks at times. The constant recycling of faces. That sometimes I'll think of a song randomly, and few moments later, I'll hear it somewhere around me. The sun and the moon are the exact same apparent size in the sky. The sun is something like 400x bigger and also 400x farther away. This trips me out every day. Think about, it has to be one of the biggest coincidences of all time. No alien life discovered. The Planck length. Basically, the universe has a maximum resolution, and there can be 2 points that are not touching that are so close together that nothing could exist between them. Deja vu. Sometimes it's so strong, you have to believe that there is something up. Nearly everything is explainable through mathematical formulas. Quantum mechanics. All of
It's 5 a.m. and I just received a call from my drunk fiancé saying that he doesn't want to marry me anymore. A couple of hours after receiving the call from my now ex-fiancé, I tried to get in touch with his family, hoping they could act as a mediator between my ex and I. To my surprise, they were extremely reluctant about intervening, and told me that this is something him and I need to resolve on our own. The reason this is surprising to me is because our families, especially his, have always been overly involved in our lives. That's just how parents and families are in our culture. My ex and I had to time and again remind them of our boundaries, which they gladly crossed despite our repeated conversations about it. So you can imagine my shock when they said they'd rather stay out of something this huge. My family, who live in another country, have been there for me through this, and are quite furious yet heartbroken about the whole thing, especially regarding my ex's family's refusal to talk to my ex about the situation. After my conversation with my ex's parents, I sort of shut myself in. My friends visited me a couple of times to make sure I was doing okay, but apart from that I didn't really speak to anyone. These last couple of days have been extremely difficult. I went through a whirlpool of emotions to the point where I felt nothing at all. At the end of it all, I had made up my mind about my future with my ex. Yesterday, I got a call from my ex. Calls, to be precise. He wanted to meet. He made the conversation sound more like, okay, you've been wanting to talk to me, so let's meet and talk. Which I found odd because after my conversation with his parents, I didn't try to get in touch with any of them again. So it's not like I was constantly trying to get in touch with him. We met, spoke a bit, it was mainly just small talk. I didn't ask him where he was all these days, even though it seemed like he wanted me to ask. I initiated the discussion about us, and he said, I think we can agree that these past few days have been stressful on both of us. Let's move past it. I was so amazed by this cold response. It sounded like I was speaking to an HR. How exactly were we both going through the same level of stress when he just made the decision? Drunk called me and told me he had made up his mind, and then disappeared on me without any further discussion. It honestly just made me lose faith in him. When I sat and thought about the night I received his call, and how it made me feel, I couldn't help but wonder what it'd be like if he acted like this over every trivial disagreement after we got married. I told him I had taken my time to think things through, and that I didn't see us working. I gave him his ring, and walked out before he had the chance to say anything to me. Anyone wants to guess what happened next? Well, I started getting calls from his mom. I didn't answer them. I've been receiving non-stop texts from my ex since then. A couple of hours ago my mom called me to let me know that my ex's mom called her to talk about what's going on. My mom, God bless her, told his mom I think it's best we let them deal with this on their own. There's so much I'm going to have to go through after this. From telling people that my engagement broke to answering their several inquisitive questions to the process of requesting a refund of the deposits. As dramatic as it sounds, every morning when I wake up, I feel a knot in my stomach, my heart feels heavy, and my throat feels like there's something stuck in there. The fact that the entire trajectory of my life has changed is absolutely terrifying. At the beginning of this month, I had my life planned out for the next 3 years. Now I have no plans. I'm not sure what my next week is going to be like. It's scary. Am I the a-hole for telling my son's pregnant girlfriend to get a job once she has the baby or move out? My son, Stephen, has been getting into trouble with the police for numerous small-time offenses like stealing and fighting, which resulted in him getting sent to juvenile detention for a few months. When he came out he had to check in with probation regularly. At the probation office, he met a girl, Lizzie, and they hit it off. She'd just come out after a year inside. Her family are very well off, but they kicked her out so she was living in a hostel. She was only there temporarily and had nowhere to go after that, so with my permission Stephen offered her to come and stay with us. When Lizzie first moved in it was tough for her. She's used to quite a comfortable lifestyle and was hoping to return to one when she came out, but she settled in quickly. I gave Stephen one more chance after he came home, and fair to him, he's managed to get a job laboring on a building site. Lizzie, however, has refused to get a job. Before she got arrested she was studying for a degree, and sees jobs like cleaning or admin work as beneath her. She's trying to find an entry-level job in the field she was studying, but has had no success. This is a bit of a problem, as even with me and Stephen working, we only just make enough to cover the rent, food and bills. More than once we've had to go days without hot water. Lizzie became pregnant a few months back and decided to keep the baby, which Stephen is fully supporting. I'm happy for them, but this will give us another mouth to feed. I said that as soon as the baby is born, if both mother and baby are healthy of course, I expect Lizzie to take any job available. I work as a cleaner in evenings and nights so I'm around in the daytime to take care of the baby while Stephen and Lizzie work. I told them that if Lizzie refuses, they can look for a place of their own. This made Lizzie cry, and say she doesn't want to do a soul-destroying job because she used to have a bright future ahead of her. I understand this and it's unfortunate, but I've worked shitty jobs all my life, and this building site job is the first Stephen ever had. Living where we do, shitty jobs are a part of life, and we won't be able to provide her baby with a comfortable home if she doesn't get one.
My Tinder date turned out to be my childhood nemesis. You see this? This one needs to be told. I don't care what anyone says, fate is real. I've never really told anyone, but the very first person I've ever hated was a girl from my childhood who stole a precious balloon I was very fond of. I was about 9 at the time and was an inpatient for private reasons. The hospital was pretty far from home so my parents couldn't see me often, but on one particular day, my mom left me a balloon with a "Get well soon" sign on it. I was fixated on it because it made me feel close to my parents, so I would take it with me wherever I was taken. And then, that evening, curious me went out of my ward and ended up getting lost cause tons of people were all over the place. The balloon ended up slipping away and I went after it. Only for this one girl about my age to grab it. Welp, when I asked for my balloon back, she refused and ran off to her mom. I was a very reserved kid and was scared of confronting her, especially with her mom, so I let her take it away. I was pretty sad cause the balloon was special to me, but I eventually let it go even though the grudge has always remained till today. Now, I matched with this a girl on Tinder and things have been going very well. On our most recent date, we discussed our past regrets and all that, and then she tells me about the time she stole a balloon at a hospital from a boy years ago but has since regretted it. She says she would apologize to the boy given the chance. I was shocked, like legitimately shocked. At first I wasn't sure cause I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, so I led her on for more information, and she revealed many more details that made me 100% sure she was that same girl. I couldn't stop laughing out loud and she'd been trying to figure out why. I said I just found it really funny but didn't tell her that boy is literally me. She explained that she really liked the balloon and she told her mom the boy gifted it to her, and now it makes sense why the mother waved at me back then. Like, I genuinely cannot believe the same person who stole my balloon years ago, my one truest antagonist, my villain origin story, has been staring at me right in the face. The worst part is, I don't know how to deal with the grudge now, and it's just so funny to me that this is happening. I'm just waiting for the perfect chance to tell her and see the look on her face.
I purposefully made a kid in a wheelchair lose a talent competition because he sucked. His entitled parents demand that he win because of his disability. I was invited to judge a music talent show contest for teenage kids, along with 2 other judges. This was the final round of the competition with only 3 people remaining. The winner would get a cash prize worth $3,000 and direct entry with a 1-year scholarship to a music school. I studied music theory for years, played professionally both solo and in bands, and was a previous runner-up for a variant of this competition. Now there were 3 students competing and one of them was on a wheelchair. The first student played a beautiful piece for a classical guitar. The second student was the one with a disability on a wheelchair, Ryan, and the third guy played Tchaikovsky. I have been playing for years and I can tell you that Ryan played worse than someone who would have never even played the piano. It was atrocious to a point that it made me cringe. He stops playing and starts crying because he forgot the rest of his piece. His mom rushed on stage and hugged him. The crowd started cheering for him to continue playing. He changed his piece to play Don't Stop Believing, but he's not even playing the melody, just the chords. The entire audience is cheering him on and singing all the words. The crowd gave him a standing ovation and his mom talked about how her son inspires her because he is a fighter and never gives up. This was really just to get sympathy points, to be honest, because he wasn't even good. When it came time to judge them, I gave Ryan a 7/100, the first guy a 93/100, or something, and the third guy 85/100. He did not even deserve the 7 points. Then, we tally up the votes and I could see the other 2 judges getting shocked at how low of a score I gave Ryan. We announced the winner, the first guy who deserved to win, and the crowd starts boo-ing. Guys. This poor first kid practiced for effing hours. Played a beautiful piece, and was booed for his hard work. At this point, Ryan's mom started feeding off the crowd and began demanding why her kid did not win. She started talking to the other judges and then went to talk to the organizer. The guy who brought me in to judge comes to me and asks me why I purposely made Ryan lose. I explained to him that I did not think Ryan deserved to win and he stormed off to talk to his superior. I tried talking to the other judges but they both want nothing to do with me. The audience is still cheering for the kid, demanding that he win. The organizer comes to me and tells me that I need to go on stage and say that I made a mistake. At this point I'm feeling terrible because I think everyone knows it was me, and also because I effed up. He convinced me to do it and we had to embarrassingly strip the title away from the deserving winner into someone with no talent. Ryan gets the new trophy and for his speech, he says that he does not think he should have won and says that he would like to give the scholarship to the first guy. Selfishly, he still keeps the trophy and money. Now the audience starts cheering for the first guy and at this point I have had just so much that I want to get out of there, so I start heading out. Ryan's mom stops me and starts asking questions like, why did you purposefully try to make my son lose? I say that I didn't think he deserved to win because he is not as talented as the other guys. She starts getting really confrontational and right on my face while she is talking. Her husband moves her away from me because she was getting aggressive and she says some mean, and slightly racist, things before turning around and walking away. Telling this story back to my friends, the general consensus I got was them saying, you're not wrong, because you did what you thought was the right thing, you're just an a-hole. Was I an a-hole?
I think she cheated on me but I'm not sure. I need help, people of TikTok. I am fairly happy with the life I built for myself. My career, hobbies, and platonic relationships are more than enough to keep me happy. And I don't actively look for relationships or intimate partners, even though I do hope to get married someday. Of course, sometimes people do come into my life and we date or sleep together, but it's not an obsession like I see with most of my friends. Then I met Helen at a party through mutual friends, and we really hit it off. I asked her out, and we had a great first date and ended up sleeping together. Things seemed to move relatively quickly from there. We saw each other about 5 times in the span of 2 weeks after our first date, all the while texting and even having an occasional phone call. I won't lie. I felt like I was falling pretty hard for this girl. She was everything I could have imagined wanting in a life partner. Intelligent, independent, passionate, and kind. Not to mention gorgeous. Well, it all went south last week when she asked me if I was seeing anyone else. I told her, of course not, and that I don't sleep with multiple people at the same time. But then I wondered about her, and she told me she had been seeing 2 other guys, but she wanted to be exclusive with me. I asked her if she had been sleeping with them and she said yes. She had even slept with both of them at least once since we started dating. I immediately thought of the show Friends. We had the Rachel and Ross problem. Once I gathered my thoughts, I told her I didn't want to see her anymore. Here I thought the feeling was reciprocated, but I found out I was just one of a few items on the menu for her. She started to get upset and told me that since we hadn't discussed exclusivity, she didn't know anything about me and that it was the whole point of this discussion. I told her that while she didn't know me, the fact that she didn't stop seeing those other guys on her own volition shows that either she didn't feel the same way about me as I did about her, or we have totally different ideas around intimacy. She said she had dated so many guys in the past who wouldn't commit, so she didn't want to end up alone if I wouldn't be exclusive. I could feel the hurt she had gone through when she said this, but I guess I don't understand why keep around casual intimacy partners if you want something serious? If she wasn't willing to take a risk for me and potentially get hurt because of her past experiences, I don't want to play the role of intimacy therapist. I didn't say this part to her, though, so I told her my mind was made up and she left in tears anyway. My friends have pretty much dogpiled on me after hearing about it. They told me I was an asshole and brought up a bunch of talking points about feminism and SLT shaming. It seemed pretty unfair since I never tried to make Helen feel bad about herself. I just didn't think we were compatible and it seemed better to end then and there. My stupid brother strapped roadkill to the roof of our dad's car without checking to see if it was dead. I was on a road trip with my brother when we saw a dead deer on the side of the road. My brother pulled over to take a look. I sat on the passenger side of the car on my phone, uninterested in looking at a random dead animal. Suddenly I heard an almighty bang on the roof of the car. I jumped out of the car, worried that my brother had been hurt, but what I saw will always stick in my mind as one of the weirdest things my brother has ever done. Realizing the deer was in one piece, he had managed to drag it onto a large tarpaulin sheet using what looked like hunting rope. He then dragged the heavy corpse over to the car and somehow managed to push and pull the deer up onto the roof. I stared at him. Tom, why the F is there a dead deer on the roof of the car? He shrugged and said you wanted barbecue earlier. I snorted and said, well, yes, but I wasn't picturing roadkill. He rolled his eyes and said that I was way too particular, that meat was meat and that if I wasn't there and he cooked this deer without my knowledge, then I wouldn't turn my nose up. He then went on to explain how he was going to cook it and that we needed buffalo sauce, and that's when it happened. A low moan caused both of us to whip around to see a dazed and confused deer staring at us. It blinked and tilted its head our way and my brother's jaw hit the floor, and I burst out laughing because how the hell was he going to get a concussed deer off the roof of the car without a wrestling match? We were both dumbfounded because it genuinely looked dead. I still can't believe my brother failed to check. Slowly realizing where it was, the deer began to wiggle and push against their constraints, rocking the car from side to side as it tried to free itself from the ropes and tarpaulin. My brother darted forward, flapping around the car in a wild panic. I couldn't breathe for laughing, choosing instead to film him as he tried to negotiate with a deer that was now totally pieced off. It let out a bellow and managed to swing so far to the left that the entire vehicle came crashing down onto one side. Still, the deer remained bound to the roof, wailing and wiggling. Finally realizing how dangerous this was becoming, I grabbed my pocket knife and began to sever the ropes, dodging the deer's aggressive kicks. My brother grabbed his gun, misfired and hit the front right wheel of the car. I paused, fuming that he was being so reckless and that we were now stuck with a wild animal, a punctured tire and no barbecue. I was mad. A passerby called Andy saw the commotion and pulled over to help. Together all three of us released the deer, which tentatively wobbled its way into the field, dizzy and angry. We hid behind the car as it turned back, and with one swift jump stormed its way back over to us. With a yell, all three of us ran to Andy's car, locking the doors just in time for the deer to headbutt the side of his car. There was a pause while we waited to see if it was safe to get out, but then the deer slowly got back up and ran off. I will never stop for roadkill ever again. Karma is a cruel mistress, and my brother had to give my dad $600 to replace his tire. What is the funniest joke you've ever heard? My roommate and I were in the military and had been out on the town bar hopping. At the last place we went to, my friend Mike was last observed screaming at this girl who worked at the chow hall on base. Our other friend clued me into the ear implant and we both wondered if Mike knew she was hard of hearing. I get a cab to the house we were staying at and wait for him to come home like a good battle buddy. Around 4 a.m. I'm woken by a raucous of slapping body parts. They're going at it on the sofa bed across the room from me. I hear do ooh you ooh like it. When I sunk your bowels I start giggling. Then I burst out laughing because I realize that Mike, my roommate, brought home the deaf girl from the bar. So she has no clue how loud they are being. Mike's breathing changes and he realizes I'm not asleep. I'm in a fit now under my blanket and she's still going ham on my boy's salted pork. In between laughs, I spout into the darkness, hungry hippos, om nom nom nom. He shushes me and tells me to shut up. I got tired of hearing the coitus and moved to a spare bedroom. But then I realized this was the perfect opportunity. After Mike and the girl fell asleep I decided to go in and start jacking Mike off. He wakes up and thinks I'm the girl he brought home. He doesn't notice at all until I say wow that's gay. He immediately jumps out of bed, turns on the lights to see me laughing my ass off. He was bright red and immediately started complaining about how shit that prank was and that he's gonna report me. In the end I got fired from my job. I got disowned and shunned from the family for sending my son to jail. I have a son who got married a year ago. That day when I called the police, I saw his wife. She had bruises, a black eye, and a busted lip. I asked her and my son, whose head was low in guilt. I asked him, son, did you do this? He replied he did. He hurt her because she served him cold coffee when he wanted it hot. My daughter-in-law told me she did bring him hot coffee but it got cold while he was talking on the phone. My son said sorry and to never do it again. I called the cops on him. He got angry and attacked one of the officers and he is in jail. This news spread in my community like wildfire and people have been calling me a bad mom. Some told me I am ruining my son's future for something so small. My son will suffer in future because of these allegations. Some told me this is his private matter. Even as a mother-in-law I shouldn't have interfered. Some told me I should support my son regardless of what he did. After all, sons are the star in a mother's eyes. I got a lot of backlash for supporting my daughter-in-law. I have been called names by everyone. They think I am making a big issue out of a small argument. Indian people see domestic violence as taboo, so they do not want to talk about it in the open. My husband told me what I did was wrong. People will shun our family. That's what happened. None of my friends talked to me. Even family members kicked me out of the group chat. My family member thinks I should have just given him a warning instead of calling the police. They all think my daughter-in-law must have done something bad for my son to react this way. My own parents think a warning to my son would have been enough. But that is not true. My daughter-in-law said he has been hurting her since 3 months into their marriage. Do I feel guilt for doing it? No. I do not. I do feel sorry I didn't catch this earlier. I do feel like I have failed as a mother because if I did a good job my son would respect women.
What are some common signs that someone grew up with shitty parents? When they think they always cause problems for others, and when they are emotionally and socially closed off, so it's very hard for them to be more sociable, etc. They tell traumatized stories and think they are happy memories. They are always trying to figure out what they did wrong and what they're supposed to be doing and how, while editing their own thoughts and feeling vaguely bad. Control freak. They grew up in chaos, alcoholism, gambling, foreclosure, and are obsessed with averting some unforeseen disaster. They're completely unwilling to open up and share anything because in their experience it will always be used against them. Doesn't talk about their interests because parents have never showed interest, belittled them. They don't understand simple gestures of kindness. They don't form attachments to others. They grew up in an environment where such attachments were a negative and or resulted in negative outcomes.
Today I effed up by accidentally teaching my roommate's parrot to sing Seabat. My roommate doesn't know yet. I am so dead. My roommate is out of town camping until the end of the weekend, and he's going to kill me when he finds out. Okay, so we all know the story with Seabat. No need to go into that. My roommate is out of town for a week, and I have the whole apartment to myself. 4 days ago, I, 29 male, asked my girlfriend, 29 female, if she would like to enjoy some delicious fun time while blasting Seabat. Her and I are both super weird and are open to doing this kind of dumb stuff. To no surprise, she laughed and said yes. I just thought it would be funny to experience. To my surprise, it really wasn't as weird as I thought it would be. It might be that the love I have for her is so powerful that it left only about 5% of my brain power focusing on the dolphin sounds in the background. The next day we decided to go at it again. Only this time Seabat was a surprise for her. After a few minutes of kissing, I turned on the music, and we both started laughing hysterically before getting it on. I even lasted longer than the day before, which I now regret. Here's the problem, which I stupidly did not even take a second to consider. While my roommate is out of town, I'm taking care of his parrot who dwells in our living room, which shares a very thin door with my bedroom. This is no ordinary parrot. This is a chattering Lori, same bird as that red one on YouTube who goes. This bird does not shut up. He makes so much noise that I've naturally learned to ignore him after a year of living with it. Anyway, somehow it never even crossed my mind that these parrots learn words and sounds, and mimic them surprisingly accurately. Before leaving for work yesterday morning, I made some coffee and sat down in the living room for a bit, just relaxing and closing my eyes. All of a sudden, I hear the first few notes of Seabat in perfect pitch and rhythm. I open my eyes, and this little dude is staring me dead in the face. 5 to 10 seconds pass, and I hear it again. I just grabbed my things and left for work immediately. I had to escape, figuring I'd just find a way to fix this or explain this later. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that I'm just dead. My roommate isn't weird like me, and he hates when I say silly things to the bird. When he comes back this weekend, I'm worried he's gonna give a notice and leave. Here is a recording of the parrot singing Seabat.
To the guy who calls people out for filming at the gym, I love you. There's a guy at my local gym with a really loud projecting voice. He has the voice of the gods. It really is a gift and he uses it for good. He gets people to stop filming in the gym by calling them out publicly and loudly. He usually says, "Hey bud, there's no filming here," or for women he says, "Hey sister." Since his voice is very loud and booming, it immediately fills the whole room and everyone turns around to see the a-hole who's filming. This is actually pretty genius because calling people out publicly forces them to comply since everyone is now aware and looking at them. They don't get the opportunity to play victim or create their own narrative since everyone is already a part of the conversation. I remember seeing a video of a guy confronting this girl privately about filming at the gym, and the moment she realized that she was being called out, she immediately ran away and played victim, which could have put the guy in danger. I'm so thankful for the guy with the voice at my gym. Sometimes when he's really angry he'll continue to rant very loudly about how everyone isn't comfortable with their bodies being on the internet, and there's a no filming rule for a reason. I owe that guy a Christmas card. Am I the jerk for asking my daughter to invite my brother to her wedding? I, 52, am currently in the process of helping my daughter, 36, plan her wedding to her fiancé, 38. We are currently in the process of planning out the guest list. I'm paying for half of the wedding, so I think it's only fair that I have some input into who gets invited. We were talking about who to invite, and I mentioned my siblings, 46, 54, 49, 48 and 50. She mentioned inviting my sisters, since they live on the same side of the country as us, but when I mentioned my brother, she got really reluctant all of a sudden. She said she didn't want to force him to travel, and I mentioned I could ask him later, and she just got quiet and said, "Well, think about it." I got upset, and said that she could invite all of my siblings, or none of my siblings. She said that wasn't fair, since it was her wedding. I'll admit, I got a little upset, and said that I was paying for half of it, and she'd made me wait for this long enough, So the least she could do was to invite my family. She got mad and said that she never asked for me to fund it, and she didn't need my money anyway. I left before I'd say something I'd regret, and drove around for a bit. I called my husband, 64M, and he said it was her wedding, and it was really up to her who she invited. I told him he didn't understand since he's an only child. He got upset and we argued for a few minutes before hanging up and driving back over to her place. I let myself in, and I heard her talking to her fiancé about how if I didn't insist that her brother's kids had to come, she'd be fine with inviting my brother. I walked in, scoffed, and said if she's worried about the number of people she had to invite, I could get a big venue, and inviting one more person won't cost that much more. She screamed at me that it's not about that, and to get out of her house and out of her life. I told her not to raise her voice at me, and her fiancé said I had to leave. Or they'd call the police. So, I went home, and told my husband what happened. He said I messed up big time, but I really don't think inviting him is that big of a deal. Am I the jerk?
What was your worst experience in a foreign country? I'm a foreign exchange student and I can confidently say that there's a reason why there are so many school pewers. I was extremely poor in Japan, but when I came to America, thinking I'd have a shot at a better future, I quickly realized I doomed myself to live a pathetic life. First off, the state of the supposed living space they gave me was screaming. I was convicted to prison for life. They literally had metal bars shaping the bed so that we wouldn't fall off the literal children-sized bunk beds. They even made these god-awful chairs that would rock if you leaned back to prevent self-unalive. I couldn't even breathe the asbestos-infested air, which meant I made no friends because everyone thought I had a few screws loose when they saw the nose pincher I put on. It didn't help that every time I heard my neighbors going to town with some randos, I started blasting Baby Shark to really help with the romantic mood. I felt like a complete outsider, and as if things couldn't get worse, my previously clear skin was now riddled with blackheads and the ugliest type of pimples. There were so many that I considered opening up a pimple-popping account because that would help me pay for my tuition over here. I even had red patches all over my skin that were dry and peeling, and everyone laughed a little when they saw me pass by. Even then supposedly nice sorority girls came up to me and suggested I use those stars pimple patches, but it didn't even help in the slightest. But I started noticing a trend. Even the sorority girls had a huge layer of makeup covering their skin, and you could tell there were a bunch of dots underneath. My roommate also spent hours every night getting ready for bed, and 95% of her routine was just some skin products. Though no matter what she did, her skin always looked kind of crusty and full of red acne. She couldn't even recommend any good skincare brand, because her acne was extremely resistant to all of her treatments. With my roommate not being able to help me, I went online to find out what could have been the cause of my acne and how I could get rid of it, because I had no idea where to even begin. Turns out, many things could have given me acne, like the new food I was eating, the makeup I bought, even the air quality might have affected me. I couldn't do anything but freak out because that just meant I was doomed to live with acne forever because of these terrible environmental conditions. I was so frantic I was even considering booking a flight back to Japan, but I couldn't afford the plane ticket so I looked for solutions instead. I spent the entire day looking, even asking my roommate if the products that appeared were good to use, but she kept telling me it didn't do anything for her. After looking on YouTube for hours, it wasn't until the middle of the night that I found something useful on there. It was a video called "Is Water Ruining Your Skin?" It was two dermatologists talking about how the water hardness of your house could have an effect on your skin, since it would damage it on a daily basis. It didn't matter what cleaners and products you used, or how long your routine was, because if your water had toxic minerals in them like calcium carbonate, your skin would never clear up, and would be at a higher risk of breakouts. That explained why I was only breaking out in America and not in Japan, since the water in Japan was very pure, and didn't have any harsh chemicals in it. I never had to deal with this type of water before, so my skin was always great, but it was normal for my roommate since she lived here her whole life. The dermatologist then went on to show studies that showed that there's a higher chance of a person getting eczema, sensitive skin, dry skin and irritation if there were high levels of calcium carbonate in their water. They suggested that getting a water filter to remove calcium carbonate would be the best solution to dealing with hard water. The one they recommended was a Q-Urify water filter because it was clinically proven to improve the skin in 2 weeks. They also suggested using a towel specifically for your face because if you're using the same towel to wash your face and body, you're just contaminating your face with bacteria all over again. Their last tip was to use a pillowcase, preferably a silk one, to protect the skin barrier from getting damaged. While I was buying the Q-Urify water filter, I also filled out the water report on their website to learn what was in the water that I was using every day to wash my face with. Turns out, it had all kinds of chemicals like arsenic and chemicals I couldn't pronounce like dibromochloromethane. Just from the arsenic I was putting on my face, I was at risk of skin cancer, and with dibromochloromethane, I was at risk of liver, kidney, and brain damage. That gave me more motivation to buy the water filter, towel and pillowcase. Just a week after using the items, my skin had started to clear up. The number of pimples on my face were reducing, and my face had stopped being so red. It didn't look swollen anymore either. I started to feel like myself again because I was regaining my beauty. I would stare at myself in the mirror just to admire the clear parts of my skin because of how much I had missed it. I felt hopeless that other night. I even wanted to hide from everybody because I couldn't stand looking like that, but everything was turning out all right. 2 weeks later, there were hardly any pimples in sight, and my skin was looking healthy again. You never would have guessed that I had the worst acne breakout of my life because none of the pimples left any scarring, and the red bumps from my irritation were gone. Even my roommate was experiencing the same results of my Q-Urify water filter. She came out of the bathroom one day, screaming with joy that her acne was finally gone. Her skin was smooth for the first time in her life and she looked radiating. She said nothing had ever done this to her skin before, and I got the feeling she wasn't lying. I also noticed she hadn't even used a face towel or pillowcase like me, so that just went on to show that water was the biggest contributor to fixing our nasty skin. Everything else fell into place right after, and a lot of other girls in our hall started using our sink for the Q-Urify water filter after seeing the change in our faces. Since then, my roommate has been nonstop telling me that her life has changed because everyone is treating her differently. People are finally noticing her and boys are asking for her number. She even got invited to a party next week, even though she had never been invited to one. In fact, she was on a no uglies allowed list that the frat boys and sorority girls.
What's the dumbest thing you've ever done while high? Getting high as F before dinner with my wife's parents. Recently, I traveled to Denver, Colorado with my wife and my wife's parents. As a resident of a non-legalized state, and as someone who is too much of a wimp to regularly buy illegal drugs, the thing I was looking forward to most was the chance to buy fancy legal weed. So the first thing I do upon arriving is drag my wife to a nearby dispensary for a shopping spree. And oh my god, it was just like in my dreams. Tons of different options in neat little sample jars and a team of helpful stoners walking me through the various strains. Are you looking for a mellow body high? Or do you want something that gives you a bit more pep and energy? Or are you just hoping for something light to take the stress off? Yes, yes and yes. I reply eagerly, like a fat kid in a candy store, and request an eighth ounce of about 7 different options. In hindsight, if I learned anything from this experience, it is that my math and science teachers never taught me basic information, like what is an ounce? Or how much weed can a person consume in a single weekend? And it was at this dispensary that I also learned that you can't actually smoke in public places. As a result, before leaving, I begged my wife to buy some edibles that I could munch on until we found a place to properly get lit. After expressing shock as to the absurd volume of drugs that we were buying, she relents, and we walk out of the store with what felt like a dump truck of weed plus a small package of seemingly innocuous ginger snap cookies. When we finally get back to the hotel room, I tear those bad boys open. Only to find about a dozen tiny cookies roughly the size of a quarter. What the fuck, Denver? Seeing the skepticism in my eyes, my wife warns me that I should go easy and look at the back of the package first before trying one. Dose size, half cookie, I read silently as I start taking micro bites from the edges, like a giant chinchilla gnawing on a sunflower seed. But what kind of a savage only eats half a cookie? So a second later, I covertly pop the remainder into my mouth. And then I quickly stuff another 2 cookies in my mouth for good measure the moment my wife turns her back. We may not have legal weed back home, but I routinely devour an entire package of Milanos in one sitting without breaking a sweat. About 30 minutes later we are in the backseat of her parents' rental car on the way to dinner. And that's when things start to go tits up. My stomach growls. Loudly and angrily. My wife looks at me with inquisitive eyes that seem to say diarrhea. But I merely clutch my tummy and mumble something about altitude sickness. You didn't eat a whole cookie, did you? She asks, 10% in genuine concern and 90% in seething irritation. Of course not. I respond, avoiding eye contact for the remainder of the car ride. A few minutes later we are climbing out of her parents' rental car and heading into some trendy farm-to-table restaurant. I don't remember how I made it to my seat, and I don't remember even looking at the menu, but I do remember the concerned look on the waiter's face as he asked me if I was doing all right. Keep it together, man, I say to myself. But my wife's sudden groan suggests that I may have also said that to the waiter. Things are going downhill fast. The waiter nods sympathetically, takes our orders, and then heads to the next table. The moment he walks away, my wife is staring daggers at me. I start to worry that the jig is up. You are sweating. From your entire face, she says with both pity and disgust. Not quite knowing what to do, I reach for my napkin and proceed to blot my cheeks, nose, neck, chin and forehead. At this point, my wife's mom looks over at me with some concern. Are you all right? She asks kindly. Yeah, the food's just a bit spicy, I reply, far too quick to realize that we had literally just ordered and that there is nothing on the table except for a basket of dinner rolls. My wife kicks me under the table to grab my attention. Bathroom. Now. She hisses. Get it together. I reluctantly get up from the table and head for the toilet. After splashing several handfuls of water on my face, I approach a urinal and start to pee. Now, one of the more disconcerting effects of those tiny ginger snap monsters is the feeling that time has become untethered from reality. As I am peeing, I start to get the very unsettling feeling that I have been taking a piss for the better part of an hour and that my wife must be pacing around the restaurant worried about me. After finally finishing, I again splash some water on my face and return to my seat, making sure to apologize to the table for being gone such a long time just in case my math was off. Next, I try briefly to engage in small talk with my wife's father, but I am far too high to understand what either of us are saying. Not wanting to start laughing uncontrollably at the wrong moment, or, really, at any moment, I figure the safest idea is to nod my head periodically and drink a ton of water. Nothing cures mental fatigue like water, right? To my wife's horror, I stand up, grab my water glass and thrust it out to the waiter, who unfortunately is on the opposite side of the restaurant. But he turns out to be really cool and, after making his way over to our table, tells me that he'll do his best to keep me stocked with ice water for the rest of the meal. He also helpfully suggests that if the dinner rolls aren't too spicy for me, I should probably eat one or two so that I'm not sitting there on an empty stomach. Smart man. However, after going through all of the bread on the table and 3 glasses of water, I start to get worried that I need actual food to offset the growing paranoia from those tiny ginger snap devils. Do you think I should flag down the waiter again and ask what's taking so long? I suggest helpfully to my wife. What? We literally just ordered 3 effing minutes ago. And at that exchange, my wife loses her cool. How many cookies did you eat? She demands. Whoa, easy there, Torquemada, I respond, somewhat horrified at her outburst. I had a few cookies, but keep it down. I don't want your parents to know how effed up I am right now. Really? They are sitting 2 feet away from you. They know. I look up and for the first time notice both of my in-laws just staring at me. For what literally felt like an eternity. What story made you realize life wasn't real? 2 weeks ago, I was about to get ready for a party at 6. Just before I started getting ready, one of my friends messaged me, super excited because a boy she's had a crush on for the last 4 years finally asked her out, and he was coming with her to the party. While I was texting her back, my younger brother walked into my room and asked if I could drive him to his friend's house, which I agreed to do. Then I went to the bathroom to have a shower and do my makeup. So I got in the shower, but when I went to wash my hair I realized that my conditioner was finished. I was pretty ticked off, because I'd only bought it a couple of days beforehand and it's an expensive brand. My younger sister always uses up my things, so I knew she'd used it all. She'd also trashed the bathroom, leaving water everywhere and her dirty towel on the floor. I was pissed off, and was about to get out of the shower in order to tell her off and get some more conditioner. But as I went to get out, I realized at the last second that she'd kicked the grippy mat we have at the bottom of our shower tub up. Our shower/tub is super slippery without the grip mat. So as I went to step out, my foot slipped and I fell with my neck down onto the edge of my tub. Time seemed to slow down in my head, and I remember my last thought was, wow, this is how I die? How stupid. But here's the thing, at the moment of impact, I woke up in a start, back in my bed. I know it sounds stupid and cheesy, like something from a dumb Netflix show, but there's literally no other way to describe what happened. I was lying in bed right before I got up to shower the first time, but I don't remember falling asleep. And the thing is, I've been a lucid dreamer for the last 5 or so years, and if this was a dream, it was way more vivid than anything I've ever experienced. What weirded me out though, was that the exact same friend who texted me the first time messaged me after. I woke up to tell me that the boy she had a crush on had asked another girl out, and she was pretty bummed about it and didn't want to come to the party. I was weirded out that there was some similarity between that and the dream, but didn't think much of it at first. As I went to reply, my younger brother came in to ask if I would take him to his friend's house. All the blood drained from my face. He just stood in the doorway looking confused, and asked me what was wrong. I rushed into the bathroom, feeling like I was losing my mind, and went to check the conditioner bottle. I know this sounds completely crazy, but the bottle was finished just like before. And the grip mat was kicked up. At that point I went to lie back down in bed and texted my friends to tell them that I wouldn't be going to the party.
Couples of Reddit, do you think women and men can be just friends? I nearly lost the love of my life because I couldn't stop thinking about his girl best friend during intimacy. My husband and I have always had amazing chemistry in bed. He could say anything in a suggestive tone, and I'd immediately pull out a wand and a rabbit. I would say our relationship was picture perfect, but his best friend Emily has caused a huge rift in our relationship. Wherever he went, she'd trail shortly behind. At first, I tried to get along with her, but she made me regret it every single time. She had made it a point that she thought she was better than me somehow. Once, I was fixing my hair in front of her and my husband and complaining about how frizzy my hair was. She saw the perfect opportunity and started ranting about how she was born with pin straight hair and only needed to brush it once a day to achieve her perfect shine. It got even more annoying when I saw that she'd start copying my outfits, but making them more expensive by adding a Coach bag. My husband never noticed it, even complimenting her when she added something cool to an outfit like a jersey. Whenever he complimented her, she'd look at me and wink, as if it proved that she was a better match for him after all. One time she even tried to seduce him by wearing a tight t-shirt and no bra and trying to do some weird yoga pose that had all of her butt in his face while working out. I had enough when she DM'd my husband asking him to meet in a janitor's closet for a surprise, which he immediately showed me because he thought it was weird. I knew he didn't entertain her, but she was starting to get under my skin. I guess he noticed my discomfort, because he stopped hanging out with her altogether. Whenever we saw her in the street, he would look the other way and act like she didn't even exist. When I asked him why, he said it was because he was tired of her behavior. She knew how much he loved me, but she couldn't handle him having time for anyone else but her. We were doing well together until I got a "hey girly" text in the middle of the night. Emily sent me 4 screenshots where my husband and her were texting and talking about meeting up to let him put it in during one of his business trips. I was heartbroken and demanded my husband explain to me why he would betray me like that. He looked at me like I was crazy, which pissed me off even more until he gave me his phone like it was nothing. I checked his messages and his messages showed an entirely different situation. He hadn't even texted her since he asked for his limited edition Kendrick Lamar vinyl back 6 years ago. She sounded like a complete idiot, so my husband and I just blocked her and moved on. But for some reason, I couldn't get over what I saw in those texts. I tried to cope by reporting her and sending her number to Intimate Disease Mandatory Reporters so that she'd be paranoid about catching a disease. It wasn't enough though. Although I knew he would never betray me like that, especially since he proved himself so well here, I also knew that I wasn't the most attractive person in the world. Emily was prettier and was his childhood best friend, and I knew deep down that she would be a better match for him. I bottled it up so much that it started affecting my husband and I's relationship. I started avoiding him and not talking to him as often, because I couldn't look him in the eye and imagine Emily looking into those same eyes. It started affecting our intimate life the worst. Before, we could give each other one look and we'd instantly want to jump each other's bones. It was like we couldn't get enough of each other. We'd have intimacy at least once a day, sometimes even more. He knew all of my sweet spots, and every time, I'd find myself begging for more. But now, I couldn't even get turned on enough when we tried to get into it because I kept imagining him doing the same things in the texts Emily sent. If we did follow through with intimacy, I could tell he was uncomfortable because I looked absolutely miserable. I kept picturing him putting it in Emily and actually enjoying it. I rarely initiated intimacy either, and I could tell it was starting to get to him. One night, I tried to start intimacy with him by wearing my hottest clothes and giving him my signature look. When he caught on to what was going on, he started kissing me softly. Every single one of his touches made my skin tingle, and I started to trail my hands down his body. But as I started to touch his boxers, the image of Emily biting off his boxers with her teeth as she said in the text popped up. I literally jumped 50 feet away from him. He looked so hurt, but I told him I wasn't feeling it today. I went to dinner the next day with my best friend and started talking about my anxiety. She told me she went through something similar when she gained a couple of pounds last year. She said she didn't feel right in her own skin, so when she tried to be intimate with her partner, she didn't even want the lights to be on. She spent the whole experience paranoid that he would feel her stomach rolls, and it got to the point where she would stiffen up during intimacy and not enjoy it at all. She told me she used something called a quickie kit, which had some products that she used with her boyfriend, and when they used it, they were doing it like rabbits. She was finally able to turn on the lights during intimacy because she was so wrapped up in the idea of being with him that everything else just melted away. I decided to look into it that night and ordered some. In about a week, it came in and I pulled my husband aside to talk. I told him that I loved and trusted him and that I wanted him to try this out with me to see if something would change. It had different types of oils that were supposed to turn me on and get my mind off Emily and focus just on me and him. He told me he was willing to do anything to make me feel comfortable and be present with him, so we tried it out. We started to go slowly, but when I kissed him I knew I missed his body so badly. He started to rub the arousal oils on me and I swear I felt sparks every time he touched me. The arousal oil calmed my legs, and started to make my fluids more intense. I saw him in a completely different light. Just the sight of him made me have to squeeze my legs. I felt a new type of frenzy, and I basically jumped on him. He kissed every inch of my body and then took out the intimacy melts. Once he stuck them inside of me, I couldn't resist. Every nerve in my body was activated, and I needed him and me desperately. So I grabbed the CBD lube from the quickie kit and rubbed it on him, then slipped it in myself. It had never slipped in that easy, and he could tell I was the most wet I had ever been for him. There was a ferocious energy in the both of us, and we started going at it. I never heard him moan as loud as he did when I slipped it in, and he didn't stop then. I heard him groaning the whole time about how good I felt around him, and I couldn't resist. This quickie kit was making me go crazy. Every single movement felt like I was floating until it got to the point where I couldn't handle it and finished. In my whole time of dating him, I'd never finished as hard as I did at that moment. We just lay there in shock for a few minutes after. The thought of Emily's little Wattpad fantasy didn't even pop into my head at any point during that. It didn't even feel like a possibility, because we felt like two puzzle pieces that fit perfectly together. I looked at him one more time and told him how much I loved him. He kissed me and all he said was, "Seconds?" I grabbed the quickie kit and his pee so fast after that.
I let a homeless child in my house and he ended up inside my wife. I never could have known opening that door would ruin my whole life. At 11 p.m., I heard 3 knocks. We rarely had visitors to our apartment, especially not at this hour. "Are we expecting someone?" my wife asked. "No," I said as I got up from our living room couch. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. I saw a child with sad eyes standing in the cold. I swung our door open to greet the little boy. His hair was light blonde, but what struck me most were his eyes. There was no color in them, 2 gaping black holes pushing at the edges of the whites in his eyes. My wife rushed to the door. "Call the police," she said, "and you, come in here now." She patted the little boy's back and beckoned him into our apartment, unknowingly the worst mistake she could have made. My wife bombarded him with questions. "Are you lost? Where are your parents? Do you have their phone number? Why are you alone?" The little boy didn't vocally respond to any of the questions. He either shook his head or nodded if it was a yes/no question. If not, he would just stare at my wife dumbfoundedly. "Let me get you some hot chocolate." My wife scrambled to our little kitchen and boiled some water over the stove. My wife was orphaned at a young age, so I knew she was trying her best to comfort this lost little boy. I got on the phone with a 911 operator and explained the situation. Despite the late hour, they immediately sent help. They arrived, asked us a few questions, and quickly escorted the boy out. He turned around and gave an innocent wave goodbye to my wife. "Thank you," he said, holding his hot chocolate in one hand. So, I thought that was it. He's in safe hands now, right? As I closed the door, I could see tears swelling in my wife's eyes. There was conflict in those tears. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I feel so sorry for him," she said. "The foster system sucks. Maybe they'll find his parents," I suggested. My wife just shook her head. That night, I could feel our bed shake to her sobs. I turned over in the sheets and rubbed her back. She was on her side with her back toward me to hide the fact that she was crying, a habit I was familiar with. Things were better the next night as my wife and I cuddled on our living room couch. But then, out of nowhere, the same 3 knocks from the night before came again. Tap, tap, tap. My wife rushed to the door and opened it to see the same little boy. She bent down and wrapped her arms around him, lifting him off the hard cement and onto the soft carpet of our living room. The boy giggled as he was lifted through the air. I'll admit, I panicked in that moment. A lost child being found at some stranger's house 2 nights in a row. I reached for my phone, but my wife suspiciously said, "It can wait till morning. Are you crazy?" The boy frowned at me with her smoldering black eyes of coal. So, I threw my hands up and said, "All right, I'll call first thing tomorrow." I grabbed some blankets and a pillow from our closet to set up a makeshift bed on our couch. My wife made another cup of hot chocolate for the boy. Then she pulled up a children's story on her phone and started reading to the boy on the couch. He was delighted and fell asleep quickly. My wife and I tiptoed to our room and slipped into bed as quietly as possible. She scrunched up close to me, and we embraced tightly. Her head rested in the crevice of my neck. "Do you think the police lost the boy?" I asked her. She stayed still, speaking into my neck. "He said they took him home last night, but he got lost again." "Wait, he talked?" "He hasn't said a word to me. He told me when I was reading." She started falling asleep mid-sentence. She must have been really tired. Not minding the warmth of our combined body heat, I dozed off soon after. I woke early that morning to an empty space in the bed. I stumbled to the kitchen in my usual way, still half asleep, and poured myself some water. My wife was lying on the ground in front of our couch. She slept on her side, facing toward the boy, as if she had been watching him sleep. Something was off. I stepped outside to make a phone call to the police. After finishing the call, I was surprised when I turned around and saw my wife standing in the open doorway. She held the little boy in her arms, inside at me. "What?" I asked. She walked back in the house, and I followed her in. I tried getting her attention, but both of them gave me the cold shoulder until the police showed up. The police were frazzled this time, apologizing to us as they tried to beckon the boy to leave with him again. This time, the boy went kicking and screaming. My wife held her hand over her mouth and cried as she watched the police drag out of our apartment. I got home from work that night and received one of the more dreadful greetings I've ever received from my wife. "Oh, you're back," she said. She wasn't sad like the night before. She was extremely annoyed. I tried opening conversations with her to no avail. She glued her eyes to the floor or to her phone the entire evening. When bedtime came around, she shooed me into our bedroom while she curled up on the couch. She was acting extremely differently ever since the police took the boy away. Like the previous night, I woke up early to an empty space where my wife normally slept. Only now, my wife was standing as a shadowy silhouette at the foot of our bed. I couldn't quite see her face in the darkness, but I felt the intensity from her eyes pin my shoulders to the bed. "Honey," I said in a weak and groggy morning voice. "You let them take him," she said. "What?" I sat up sharply. "He's a lost child. He doesn't belong with us. You let them take him." She lowered her hand from behind her back down to her side, and I saw our largest kitchen knife held tightly in her clenched fist. I jolted over in bed and flipped on the light switch. My wife instantly reacted to the light and dropped the knife. Her eyes squinted, and she fluttered them as she does when she wakes up. "What happened?" She asked if she stood there. "Careful," I pointed to the knife on the ground. "Don't step on it." She picked it up in confusion, eyes now wide awake. "Why is this here? You were standing here, pointing a knife at me." She burst into tears and slammed her face into our bed. I crouched next to her and put my arms around her. "It's okay," I said. "I think we might need to get a therapist to work this out." She nodded, still sobbing face first into the blanket. The next thing I did was call in sick to work. Nothing like this had ever happened to my wife, and I was determined to be there for her until we found a way to fix it. I made her some breakfast that morning, but she fell asleep on the couch before I could finish it. She was dead tired, and it made me wonder how long she stood at the foot of the bed waiting for me to wake up the previous night. I put her breakfast on a plate and set it on the ground in front of the couch in case she woke up. I needed a shower. I took a quick shower, expecting her to be up and about when I was done. I was surprised and relieved to see that she was still sleeping when I got out. I took the opportunity to do some research on therapists in my area. I called a few, and the soonest we could be seen by someone was 2 days. But one office mentioned that we could walk in at any time if it was an emergency. Seeing my wife lie in peaceful sleep on the couch, I naively thought that it could wait. She woke up late in the afternoon. The breakfast plate I made had long since gone cold, so I dumped it and started making a light dinner of chicken and rice. It was hard to go wrong with chicken and rice, and I knew it was one of my wife's favorite dishes. "Morning, honey," I said. "Want some food?" She ignored me completely, and she robotically rose from the couch. She grabbed the car keys and was out the door before I could say a word in protest. "The hell?" I said aloud. I turned the stove off and ran to my room to get some socks on. I threw shoes on right after and hobbled outside. Smoke rose from the tires as she sped out of our complex and toward the highway. I went back inside our apartment and my phone out of my pocket. I called her, and I heard her phone vibrating in between the couch cushions. She had left her phone here. I ended the call from her phone, and her screen changed to a low-quality colored photo of herself. Except it was different. It was her in a child's body. Her eyes were turned black, like the boy's eyes. Her hair was a lighter blonde color, but it was her. She or he stood alone, staring at me as if I was a stranger. I put her phone down and tried to think of where she would have driven off to, but I lost my train of thought when I heard 3 faint knocks at my door. Tap, tap, tap. I crashed my homewrecker sister's wedding with my ex. I, 24, was with my ex-fiancé N, 27, since I was 13 and he was 15. He was my first love, my first everything. We got engaged when I was 20 and about 6 months after we found out we were expecting. Unfortunately, I miscarried a couple days later. That was the worst moment of our lives. We always dreamed about starting a family early, so this was a major blow to us individually and to our relationship. I fell into deep depression and I admit I was wrong for only caring for the lost I felt and not my partner's. We argued a lot, he partially blamed me and I accused him of not knowing how it felt to lose a life you were growing inside you. We were hurting each other and decided to separate for a while, that while turned into a year. We still kept in contact, I went to therapy and worked on healing myself, he even came to a few sessions with me. We decided to get back together shortly after my 23rd birthday. However, the relationship wasn't the same. He was somewhat withdrawn from me and I thought it was because he still blamed me. I was sick overthinking and worrying. It got to the point where I was going backwards in my process, so I decided to snoop through his phone. I found out during the year we separated he had been confiding in my sister, 27, and it turned to something intimate. He cut it off when we got back together, but the damage was done. She was pregnant. Turns out my parents knew about this and some of our friends. I kicked him out and cut off everybody who knew. Well, a couple weeks ago I got an invite to the wedding. Something snapped inside of me, I got drunk and I took a cab to my parents' house where they were throwing a party for them. Most of my family was there, I basically showed up and gave a whole F you speech to everybody. My sister ran upstairs in tears and my parents called me in a hole for ruining the prospect of their wedding. I said good because nobody apologized to me, everybody just kept saying we were separated, things happen, people fall in love, I should be happy for them, the heart wants what I wants. The worst part is my sister told me maybe my baby died for a reason so she could get her happy ending.
What are some crazy World War II facts you know? Winston Churchill had an oxygen mask for flying an airplane specially made for him that would allow him to smoke cigars while he had the mask on. The United States produced 150% more planes in 1944 alone than Japan did in the whole war. More U.S. soldiers died in World War II in accidents, automobile plane crashes, fires, falls, etc., than combat deaths in the entire Vietnam War. Only about 4% of Londoners used the tube stations for shelters in the Blitz, about 40% used Anderson shelters under their back gardens or cage-like shelters in their homes. The rest stayed in their usual bedrooms and hoped for the best. The Soviet 13th Guards Rifle Division, one of the units in the Battle of Stalingrad, suffered 30% losses in the first day of fighting. Just 320 of the original 10,000 soldiers survived the entire battle.
I found out my girlfriend talks bad about me after I snooped through her phone. My girlfriend and I have been dating for a little under a year now. We met 3 years ago when she was in college and I was spending the summer with a relative in the same city as her. We met on a dating app, went on a date, and started hooking up. I thought she was a sweet girl and very cute, but nothing else ever happened because a week after she started classes again, she told me she was seriously talking to someone. I left for grad school so we didn't speak again after that. Had each other on Instagram though, until about a year ago when she ended up going to grad school at the same institution. I saw on Instagram that she was here, slid into her DMs, and then we started dating. I thought she showed pretty much every green flag I could ever imagine. She has lots of friends she's really close to her family, volunteers, has lots of hobbies, and is academically and professionally successful. She's so incredibly sweet and considerate. For example, my birthday was just a month after we started dating and yet she still got me a perfect gift. She is pretty much beloved everywhere she goes, her colleagues love her, my friends love her, my family love her. I also want to emphasize how not mean-spirited she is. I've definitely dated girls before who would be cheap towards people around them, but my girlfriend is nothing at all like that. The only times I've heard her talk badly about people, it's like she's in a stand-up comedy special. It's all humor, nothing mean. And she never gets into arguments with her friends or family and is pretty much on good terms with everyone she's ever met. Anyways, today she was working on her computer and left for the gym. For some reason she left it on, I think she had some research thing running. It was on the kitchen counter so I had to move it, and I saw a Google Drive folder shared with a bunch of people that was actually titled Smoke Darts Eat Farts Super Duper Secret Edition. I know I should absolutely not have looked, but my curiosity got the better of me. Basically it was a folder shared with her friend group from college, which is about 10 girls and super close. There were a lot of subfolders. The first one I looked at had homework keys and back exams from their classes. Then I looked at a document that was titled Beaches Love Being Out of Pocket. It was massive, like 100 pages, and there were subheadings for different topics. It seemed like a collection of out-of-pocket things any of them had said. Each one was cited with the name of which one of them had said it. As I was scrolling through I saw my name under a subheading Men Chicken emoji. Here's what it said, paraphrased: he seems like the kind of man to purchase LinkedIn Premium. I feel like he jerks off to his own Instagram stories. There's no way that at least once in his life he hasn't removed a Beach's tampon with his teeth. They were all signed with my girlfriend's name. I'd felt bad about snooping until then, but after that I really wanted to see if there was anything else about me. I looked through the rest of that file and there were insults about basically everyone they'd ever met, including about every man my girlfriend had ever been with. Honestly, mine were way less mean than theirs. I guess that's a positive? There was also a folder with presentations it seemed like my girlfriend had made and presented before each semester in college. They were all titled something like Roster or To Hose and the Date, and they had a slide for every man she was talking to, as well as a recap for whoever she'd done over break. Of course I was there, with my full name and pics of me and a picture of my effing car too. The only description of me was 6/10, bought me cigs and let me use a flavored condom. There were also a lot of pics and videos of them doing illegal/disgusting things, and there were some very mean things about other men they knew, like ranking them on the FS loser scale. The only other thing I saw about me was in a folder titled Life-Changing Moments that had a list for each of them. There were a lot of insane things in my girlfriends that I'd never heard about. Think, chlamydia from unprotected sex with a frat brother, or a Vespa ride with a beautiful Italian man, or smoked a pack and threw up. There was also one about me which basically said, F'd_ and realized I needed to get out of my hoe era if I didn't want to end up being a sad sack of poop too. That is the one that really got me, as it seems so much meaner than everything else, and I have no idea what she meant by it. It was getting close to the time she would be back though, so I just closed everything and locked her laptop. She got back, I didn't mention anything, and we just had dinner as normal. I am here now because I have absolutely no idea what to do. Everything I saw was honestly awful, and yet she is the last person I would ever expect something like this from. I am in disbelief and I really don't know where to go from here. I am hoping there is some explanation that doesn't make her the world's worst person, and yet I really don't want to confront her either. We have a great thing going and I don't see any way that confronting her isn't going to lead to drama. I don't want to talk to anyone I know about this, in case we stay together and she then has to face them, so I thought I would ask here and see if anyone had any reason to apply to this completely absurd situation. Update, I found out my girlfriend talks bad about me after I snooped through her phone. I did some reflection and realized that her tone didn't really seem to be much meaner than the jokes she usually makes about people. The ones about me in particular I realized were actually hilarious, like I kept cracking up about the LinkedIn one. And they were honestly entirely accurate too. What I was honestly really bothered about was that I was included, and I pretty much wanted to know if she actually liked me or was just settling. I knew about her thought phase before, so I wasn't that upset about it either, and I felt like it wasn't my place to say anything about that. I decided that I needed to confront her because the situation was upsetting me a lot. I decided that I was going to A, ask her about the 6/10 rating because it honestly hurt my pride a lot, ha ha ha. B, ask her about the sad sack of poop comment because that was the one that seemed meanest. And C, ask her in general if she actually wanted to be with me. It would also have been a deal breaker if she kept updating the document with stuff about me after we'd started dating, or if she had any really unacceptable stuff on people, like revenge porn. Unlike what a lot of people said, I did not think she was going to Ted Bundy me while I slept. I've seen her in plenty of high stress situations and I have never thought she was going to commit homicide, and I'm also not that afraid of a 5 feet 3 inches girl. I also didn't think it was right to not say anything, as I knew it was going to continue bothering me. That said, I did realize that I wanted to F with her a bit. I've never met anyone who takes it better than her, like anytime I've seen people making jokes about her she takes it very well and enjoys it, so I didn't think it would upset her too much. The day after I made my post, we didn't see each other until dinner. I've been a bit weird all day over text, but she didn't think much of it and just asked me if I was okay. I'd devised my plan at this point, so over dinner I dropped that I was considering buying a LinkedIn Plus subscription for networking. She gave me a side eye like I had never seen before and asked me why on earth I would do that. I saw her later texting her group chat. I didn't see what, but I was pretty sure it was about that. That night, we were trying out something new in the bedroom, and as we were cuddling after, I asked her if she was open to something when she was on her period. She asked me what, and I asked if I could take her tampon out with my teeth, as I'd seen a lot on TikTok about it. She looked like she was actually going to scream but held it in and said sure. The next day she seemed suspicious, so I decided to really finish it off. She went to work and I had the day off, so I decided to really go to town on my Instagram story. Some of you thought that the Instagram story comment meant I posted pics of myself on there, but I actually just post a lot of aesthetic pictures that I do spend a lot of time taking. I think that comment in her doc was probably because on our first date I took some pics for my Instagram story, and she said something like, oh yeah, I like those, and I said, hey, they're not really good enough, and she laughed at me even at the time. So anyways, that day I roamed around the city to all my favorite aesthetic spots and posted probably 10 or so stories, which I imagine annoyed everyone a lot. She slid up on them, and by the 10th one she said, damn, you're really going to effing town on these today. So I replied something like, Lamao, yeah, it gets me in the mood, you know, to which she replied with the ha emoji. At this point I think she'd caught on, and I had honestly been acting a bit off too because my pride was still a little bruised, and I was also regretting having snooped. That night, she came to my place with my favorite dinner and subtly, for her, asked me if there was anything I wanted to talk about. At this point I laid it out for her, and I prefaced it with apologizing for snooping, but that the title of the document had caught my eye. She looked absolutely mortified but was also laughing and kept apologizing. I laid out my 3 concerns to her, and she told me that A, the 6/10 was truthful at the time, but she did like me a lot, as evidenced by dating me. B, the sad sack of poop comment was about all the people she knew who only hopped around and never had real relationships, and that sleeping with me made her realize that she would much prefer to be in a relationship with someone like me, but that she thought she'd squandered her chances by hooking up with me instead. And that C, yes, obviously she loved and liked and respected me a lot. She also invited me to look through the folder freely, and that she wasn't ashamed of anything in there, just embarrassed that I'd seen those comments about myself. I checked and there was nothing in there about me since we'd started dating. The only stuff was from when we'd hooked up. She also pointed out a document that I hadn't looked at before. It was in a folder titled Rankings and each girl had a doc in there. She only let me look at hers, but it was basically a ranking of every person she'd ever been involved with in any way. It was a long document, with comments. I was first, and where for everyone else there was a list of pros and cons, mine just said love him 4x. Also, it seemed like they would all comment on each other's to argue about the ranking, like some of them had things like no he was sexy, move him up, but mine just had comments from all the girls pretty much affirming the choice and praising me. So I was pretty satisfied with what I saw, and it also seems like they only update it now with stories, gossip, or pictures and no insults or anything else like that. My girlfriend was overall mortified and was extremely apologetic, and I was also apologetic about looking through it, and told her she could look. Threw anything I owned if she wanted, but she turned me down. She wasn't upset about the snooping at all, and said that she had nothing to hide and that she would have done the same thing if she'd seen a folder as artfully and intriguingly named as theirs. So yeah, we are all good.
I gave my husband an ultimatum and he took it. I married my husband Frank about 15 years ago. At the time, he was a widower with 2 young daughters, Jane and Lisa. He was a widower of over 2 years and we met through mutual friends. We dated for almost a year and got married. Frank warned me that his girls would always go first, and that he would choose them over me if he had to, but I didn't take him seriously. I thought because their mom was dead, the girls would see me as a mother figure right away. Well, they never saw me as a mother, not even as a stepmother. I was always Dad's wife. Early in our marriage, I brought up having kids. My husband refused, since the girls were still young and he didn't want them to think that he was replacing them. I respected that, but years later, he had a vasectomy because we were too old for that anyway. I was, still am, a stay-at-home mother and did everything to bond with my stepdaughters, but it never happened. They never included me in their lives, they left me out of important photos, and I never got any Mother's Day gifts. At times I felt like their housekeeper. When the eldest, Jane, moved away to go to college, I saw an opportunity to bond with Lisa, since she was always following her sister, but it didn't work out either. She always refused to spend time with me and Frank would always take her side. We often fought, and after she turned 18, she moved in with Jane, not being shy and saying that it was because she couldn't stand me. Frank visited them 3 times a week, but he never took me with him because they didn't want me there and he couldn't force them. We were a good couple and he was a good husband, but when it came to his daughters, I was left out. For example, for Christmas, he would spend the 24th with me, have dinner and presents, but he would travel on the 25th to spend it with his daughters and he never bothered to ask them to invite me. It's really frustrating. I'm not saying that they owe me anything, but I took care of them for more than 10 years. I cooked, cleaned, went to school meetings, etc., and they don't even text me for my birthday. Lisa married her boyfriend of 3 years last week. The invite only listed my husband as part of the bride's family and I was just a regular guest. Frank didn't fight it, since it was a wedding, although he paid half of it. I felt like an outsider all the time. The worst was when Lisa did a mother and bride dance with her husband's grandma, but she didn't even acknowledge me during the whole ceremony. At home, I blew up on him, how disrespected I felt, how he never did anything to bring me closer to his daughters, and how I felt like a stranger in my own family. I gave him an ultimatum that if he didn't start getting involved and being on my side, I would leave. He just nodded and said fine, go away. I froze. He reminded me that he would always be on his daughter's side and that if I didn't like that, he wouldn't force me to stay. In the end, we left it there and we've acted as if nothing happened. It breaks my heart that he took my ultimatum like it was nothing, almost expressionless. I don't know what to do. He's a good husband, but I don't want to be an outsider in my own family.
Write up your best employee after he came in to help on his day off? Not my story, but recently happened to a friend of mine. Personal details omitted obviously. My buddy Steve has worked at a small business for over 10 years. Most of his time there has been pretty alright, but recently it has become a remarkably worse place to work. Steve is the most senior employee outside of management and by far the most productive. He's always training new hires, working extra hours, helping other departments, you name it. Pretty often, Steve will come in for a couple hours on his day off to take care of backed up paperwork and general housekeeping of his department. This does wonders for keeping the department running smoothly, especially when they are busy. Management knows about this and approves. Going into the holidays this year, they are absolutely slammed, as usual. Orders are backing up and it's all hands on deck, extra hours, full tilt. After another 60-hour work week, Steve has a couple days off. On his second day off, he decides to go into work for a few hours. He knows his coworkers are likely too busy to be taking care of the side stuff, so he's being a team player and helping out. While he's finishing up and about to leave, Steve's manager comes up to him and they have the following conversation. Hey Steve, quit messing around, get back out there and do your job. Steve replies, hey manager, sorry, it's my day off, I'm not scheduled to work this shift. I'm just helping out, leaving in like 5 minutes. Manager replies, the hell you are, get your ass out there. Steve says, nope, not happening. I'm going home. The next day, Steve is predictably brought into the office, dressed down, and written up for insubordination. But there's a few things about Steve that you should know, that his employers knew but either forgot or didn't care about. 1. Steve has been getting fed up with his employer for a while now. 2. Steve is quite financially stable, as he works in a high-demand industry, and his wife also has a fantastic well-paying job. 3. Steve is about to become a dad. In fact, he is very very close to becoming a dad, right after the holidays most likely. So, Steve is in the manager's office, just finished getting talked down to, and handed his write-up to sign. Steve signs his write-up, and hands it back, along with an envelope with a short letter inside. What's this? Manager asks. My 2 weeks notice. Cue the backpedaling. Manager is apologetic, asks for Steve to at least finish the holiday rush. Big boss comes in and offers a raise if he stays, the whole shebang. Steve turns it all down. Now Steve's former employer has to get through the holidays without their most reliable worker, which will take at least 2 or 3 new hires to cover. Meanwhile, Steve can enjoy the holidays without stress, help prepare for the arrival of their baby, and start looking for work again when they're good and ready. Edit, obligatory wow this post blew up reaction. Some clarification, Steve's position is hourly, and he got overtime pay for the extra hours. The stuff he worked on during these extra hours would collectively save his department a lot of time and headaches, that's why he did it. There used to be a good team vibe in the company from top to bottom, co-workers who were genuinely friends and good teammates, so going the extra mile made a good thing even better. Not so much towards the end. Also, giving his 2 weeks instead of quitting on the spot was a combination of professional courtesy and also giving his co-workers enough warning to not completely blindside and bury them. Who's the dumbest person you've ever met? 1. I know a girl who genuinely believes that gorillas and giraffes are not real and the ones at the local zoo are just people in costumes. 2. Girl in my astronomy class said, so, if I went out into space could I like push the stars around and knock them into each other and stuff? Teacher says, no they are incredibly massive objects. They look so little. 3. A friend of mine back in high school learned that only natural-born citizens can become president of the United States. Said she can't become president as she was a C-section baby. 4. This isn't close to the stupidest thing she had said, but it's the only thing I can remember. Girl in my high school admitted in class that she poured an entire jug of antifreeze on her windshield to melt the ice. 5. I once worked with someone who asked me if they make air conditioners, why don't they just make air shampoo? And was dead serious. 6. This girl I knew used to rewind YouTube videos so the next person wouldn't have to wait. I simply tipped my fedora and let her carry on. 7. A very famous lady won't shop at the Whole Foods market I manage. She wouldn't let my cashier's hand touch her food. The personal assistant proceeded to take my cashier's spot, insisting the person may get sick from worker contact. That's pretty dumb. 8. The dumb ass that's always looking back at me in the mirror of my bathroom mimicking everything I do. He just looks like a bitch, I've gotta fight him. 9. I had to explain to a girl that penguins were not fish. I had to explain to another girl who I told this story to as to why the first girl was not correct. 10. I was around 10, or 11, or whatever the normal age is when you know your own address. And I just made a new friend and she invited me over to her house to hang out. I planned on dropping by after taking my things home so naturally I asked for her address. She grabbed a paper and pencil and started drawing 3 houses. She pointed to the middle house and said, I live here. Never talk to her again. 11. Let's all remember that to a certain degree, a person not knowing something doesn't mean they're dumb. 12. A girl in my school was using a calculator on a test and typed the math problem in wrong and she then proceeded to write down syntax error as an answer. 13. I once watched a girl at the gas station pump her Ford Focus full of diesel because it was the lowest price at the time. Who's the dumbest person you've ever met? It's not uncommon as a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99% of the time they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what theme is, but they somehow know how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick to not judge fish for their tree climbing ability, you know? I thought this was the rule when I was teaching until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we used to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry, it was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk and work with a student for a bit. I thought that's fine. I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade. And now he was in 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we needed to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive. Today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists and he's laughing uncontrollably. I won't allow my daughter to go back to my cousin's house because of her autistic son. My cousin and I both have 2 kids the same age. We have 12-year boys and 11-year girls. Her 12-year-old son, Damien, is autistic and has a lot of issues that we believe are unrelated to autism, but we are no experts on the subject. My 12-year-old son, Christopher, loves hanging out with Damien because he enjoys knowing that he brings some sort of joy to Damien's otherwise rough life. Damien has been kicked out of every school he's been to, so he has no friends. Our daughters are the best of friends as well. Basically inseparable. Well, about 2 weeks ago, my cousin asked if she could take my kids for the week. There was a COVID outbreak at school, so school was called off anyway. I said that was fine after asking the kids if they wanted to go. Everything was perfectly fine for the entire week, I thought. I checked on the kids often. They seemed happy and to be having fun. However, that all changed when I picked my kids up. That's when they told me all the weird shit Damien was doing. My daughter would wake up to Damien stroking her hair or arms while she slept, and when she caught him, he pretended to be asleep. He went into his sister's room at some point during the night against his parents' rules. I guess he also told my daughter several times that he likes her, and when my daughter told my cousin about it, she basically said, it's okay to have crushes, but where you are related, you simply can't act on it. I guess he also kept trying to take pictures of her. I'm unsure whether or not she corrected her son's behavior by touching my daughter in her sleep. However, I do know that not once did she tell me anything that happened. My kids did, while she kept it hush-hush. After finding all of this out, I called my cousin and said that my kids would no longer be allowed there because my daughter now felt uncomfortable around Damien. She is pissed because he doesn't mean it. It's not like he went out of his way to be weird, he doesn't understand, it's his autism, but says she ultimately understands. However, she's still making me feel bad about it because her kid has autism and doesn't know why he isn't allowed to see my kids anymore. I guess he has been having a lot of outbursts since that point, one of them resulting in her needing to call the police because he became violent and started throwing chairs. What is something that you need to confess? I go to town on myself in the bathroom at work 3 times a day. I'm terrified of going to university and I'm getting on in age. I did the deed with a guy once. I've been taking stimulants to lose weight and I think they're going to end me. My heart is beating really right now and I have terrible pains everywhere. I am steadily on my way to becoming an alcoholic. My mother's husband ended the life of my guinea pig, so I scrubbed the toilet with his toothbrush, peed in his wine, put glass shards in his shoe, put hydrogen peroxide in his eye drops and spiked one of his lunches with horse tranquilizer. He got into a car accident after the tranquilizer won and I'm proud of what I did. I'm still crazy in love with my ex-girlfriend, but she won't take me back because of my lifestyle and the fact I sold her watch to buy some green. I cheated at poker this Saturday so that my friend would win. I probably have a disease but I'm too afraid to get tested. I slept with my best friend while her girlfriend was in the next room. I'm so sorry about that, Lauren, we both messed up really hard. I can never make that up to you. I took a heroic dose of mushrooms and it changed my life. A couple of months ago I was in the worst place of my life. I was drinking every day and night and digging myself a deeper and deeper hole into addiction. I dabbled in magic mushrooms a little bit before in my life and one night I figured I'd try doing some alone. Boy, I ended up having a bad trip, and at the time I thought, the worst night of my life. I went on this weird psychedelic journey through my own head and I told myself things like I wasn't worth anything or I don't deserve happiness. I thought I saw God and angels and demons. And I'm not religious. This lasted for 7 hours and I thought that it was just a bad trip, but afterwards I felt extremely different. It was like my whole mindset on life changed overnight. I began slowing down my drinking, and I stopped smoking as much grass. I started applying myself more at work. I began looking deep into myself and I was actually able to commit for the very first time in my life to my general well-being and happiness. I can dream again, and I have a clear head now. I can actually take a look at myself and see what I am. Now I'm not saying everybody should go out and eat too many mushrooms, but I do feel like it opened a whole new door in my life. I'm happy again. I don't drink. I don't smoke marijuana. I stopped worrying so much about my recent breakup. I'm currently in the best place in my life. I don't attribute it all to that one night, but I swear that my mindset changed for the better, and that's what is important. Thanks for letting me share, Reddit. I could be wrong, but I just wanted to get this off my chest.
My child is alive, but not really. I just have to let this out. I have a good friend whose baby really did pass away, so I can't say shit. My son is 14. He's nonverbal, in diapers, needs help with all basic care. He's the sweetest, he's happy, he giggles and hums all the time, but that's it. And I thought I grieved, but now that he's this age, I can't stop crying. I was big into sports. There's no sports. There are no camps he can go to because of diapers. Yes, we've tried it all, we've accepted this is our lot in life. We're fine with that. There's no homecoming, there's no boyfriends or girlfriends, there's no prom, there's no teaching him how to drive or grounding him for sneaking out. There's nothing. It's like he died in 2009. And I just have the shell. I got to get pregnant once. I got to have one child. And that's it. I'm close to 40 and I got one chance. I was fine ages 2 now. But now it's real. Now my friends are having babies and my nephew is growing up. I have a perpetual toddler. My life isn't the same as anyone else. I have a great job and career. Supportish system. My husband said we can adopt and help older kids, but it's not the same. Because my son will be the same age year after year no matter who we'd adopt or help. I'm stuck. Why am I even building a career? I love my job, but what the F is the point? So I can pay for diapers? I am just beside myself in grief. And yet, he's alive. So how can I complain? I left my drunk husband at home and he probably offed himself. It was a good day yesterday. We had plans to go out to get our reserved collector's item things, watch a movie later in the day. It was 3 in the morning when I woke up and he started screaming. He was drunk. I was disappointed, but most of all scared. I'm a smaller female, compared to his taller, bigger, heavier frame. He gets blackout drunk and argumentative when he had much to drink. He scares me when he gets his drunken fits. We've talked about his drinking before. He struck me in the face the last time, had bruises where he grabbed me the last time. I told him, once he was sober, that I would leave for the sake of my safety if such an incident were to occur again. Unfortunately, it happened once more last night, seemingly without any trigger. He was drinking beer, he always did, but promised me he wouldn't go overboard. It's been half a year since the last time, so what happened tonight, I didn't see coming. I was already in bed, asleep when he started screaming, probably enough to wake the entire floor. We live in a condo. I confronted him and he started arguing, challenging me what it is he did this time. He wasn't aware he was shouting. I didn't want to talk and argue with a drunk man, so I start packing. He didn't like it, so he lashed out and pushed me to the floor. I finished packing regardless. In his drunken state, he accidentally locked himself out of our unit. When I opened the main door to leave, he was begging me to stay and talk it out. I wasn't having it. He then pushed me outside and told me to leave. I left. There were some moments where he followed me to the lobby and talked crap at me about how I didn't care for him, that all I wanted was to go live with my parents again. I'm staying with my family to sort myself out and give each other space. He's been texting me, telling me we're done and he's going to off himself. He's always been threatening to off himself. There were several times I had to push or block him out of the balcony with my puny frame so he wouldn't jump. He's a huge man compared to me. I always stayed and did my best for him not to off himself. I always get myself hurt in the process, but this time I left, and he texted me how he's going to do it. He hasn't replied to my messages and calls since. I'm not sure why I'm posting. He's probably gone now, but I'm so burned out and tired and scared to check on him. If he went through with it, how I'll handle seeing his lifeless body, how I'll handle everything after the fact. I'm scared and thinking I probably should have just sucked it up and cowered under the sheets as he screamed and let it all pass. I am in love with the other woman's man. I've fallen in love with the husband of the woman my husband is cheating on me with. My husband and I had been together for 10 years, with a precious little daughter together. I found out a year ago that my husband is sleeping with his employee. How? Her husband, let's call him John, contacted me. He was heartbroken and he thought that I ought to know. He provided me with text messages and dated when they've been in hotels. I recognized my husband's style and I recognized the other woman. I have seen her on multiple occasions when I visited my husband at work. She'd been nothing but kind and pleasant towards me and she always doted on my daughter. I asked John what he wanted to do and he said that he wasn't sure yet, so I requested that we should meet. He agreed. I told him about my life and that I'm currently not working. After the pandemic I lost my job and now the economy I haven't really had any opportunity to find a job. Instead, I've been studying these past 2 years. If I divorce now I won't be able to provide for my daughter. That would probably put her in my husband's custody as a primary provider. I asked him if he could wait for a few months, hopefully longer therefore, and to my surprise he agreed. I thanked him profusely but he told me that he didn't know what to do either, so he's happy to wait. Also, the other woman has 3 children from a previous relationship and he was worried that she would refuse him being in their lives once he confronted her because he's not the father. We kept in touch however. He called me a few times a week and soon we started to talk about other things other than our failed marriages. Afterwards we started going for walks, coffee, movies, etc. I found myself thinking about him often with a smile on my face. He was the first thing I thought of in the morning and the last thing I thought of before going to bed. For the last 3 to 4 months we probably mentioned our spouses 1 or twice. We talk about everything else. And he always makes me laugh. He thinks I'm funny too. 2 weeks ago we were having a picnic and he just blurted out, "I think that I'm in love with you." When he then explained himself it just drove the point home that I also am in love with him. He said that at first he wasn't sure why he was feeling like this towards me and explained it away as 2 jilted people finding comfort in each other, but that he then realized that he wasn't broken anymore. That he even thinks of his wife's infidelity as a blessing because it leads him to me. That was exactly how I felt too. I didn't know what to say. I told him that I'm terrified that these are false feelings that would go away once we've freed ourselves from those who hurt us. He just beamed at me and said he was willing to take the risk just to find out. He kissed my hand because I thought we were still married, and if we did something then how are we better than our so? I don't know what to do now. I find myself daydreaming about him. About introducing him to my daughter. Kiss him. Wake up next to him every morning. I still have 1 semester left and then I'm probably going to find a job. I've already had some offers for when I'm finished with my studies. I have thanked John so many times for being so patient with me about everything. I appreciate that he's waiting for me to put my life in order before we expose our spouses who aren't really seeing each other as often as they used to. He told me he's happy to help and he just wants a real kiss as a thank you when everything is over. My goal now is to secure my job and lead this marriage. Am I pathetic for wanting to give John and I a shot and see where it would go? Can 2 broken hearts really find happiness together when their love story starts like ours? I am in love with the other woman's man. John and I have decided not to see each other anymore. The reason why I'm writing now is that John and I met yesterday. If you remember my last, we decided not to see each other, at least not as often, since the I love you talk. We did good keeping that promise, but we still saw each other once since I wrote here and we continued texting and calling each other on a daily basis. Yesterday we met on John's initiative. When I got to the park, to our usual meeting spot, John was already there. He had flowers, coffee and cake. I love cake, and he told me that we're going to have a little celebration. He said that today was the day we first met a year ago. Yes, it was. I remember that day very well. It was raining then too, but it was much, much gloomier. I remembered how broken and desperate I was. The feeling that my world had ended. We talked a lot about the progress we made and how much stronger we both felt now. He told me he loved me and it was all I could do not to just fuck everything and jump into his arms. He is so lovely. When I got home my husband had already picked up our daughter and they were just joking around and having fun. I felt so much sadness and pure horror building up inside me. What am I doing? What are we doing? All of us? The guilt that washed over me seeing my daughter's happy face playing around with her food. I couldn't take it. My husband and the other woman haven't texted at all this month, and they haven't met either, or at least as far as John and I know. Of course, they work together, so we don't know if the affair has subsided or that they just have learned to be more cautious, but my husband has been more attentive at home. Warmer and more present. He says he loves me all the time and that he misses me. I haven't been intimate with him since I found out about the affair, and even the smallest touch from him irks me, and any beautiful word or compliment from him sets my teeth on edge. I just want to scream liar, and I feel like I'm cheating on John. Accepting my husband's affection and the disdain for myself becomes unbearable. Make this make sense. Please. I looked at my husband and tried to remember what I loved about him, but I couldn't. All I could see is his text to her, about how great last time was and what he wanted to do to her next. All the things he once said he wanted to do and did to me that made me feel so special. I tried to think harder about the love, but all I saw was John's face. I felt immense rage and hatred towards my husband, but also towards myself and John. My husband because he broke us and brought this mess upon us, and myself because I felt that I wasn't trying hard enough with my heart occupied with someone else. Have I just given up so easily because I love John? And my daughter? She is the one who's going to pay the hard price of seeing her home break because daddy is a selfish, greedy cheater and mommy isn't trying hard enough to save her marriage when she is pining for another man. I couldn't control my feelings of anger and resentment and guilt, so I wrote John a long text telling him all this and more. He tried to call me, but I couldn't answer him. My heart was swollen in my throat. I told my husband that I want to sleep in my daughter's room tonight, something I've been doing a lot since this all started. I cried all night watching her beautiful face so peaceful and happy. John called me again and we talked for over an hour. He was very subdued and I heard the fear in his voice. He told me that he respected my wishes in taking a break from each other, but also to remember that even when I was at my weakest I still knew exactly what I wanted and that I chose to stay to secure a future for myself and my daughter. You're too close now to your goal just to stumble and fall. He said he loved me and that he never felt like this before. And that he will wait. I cried for a good hour afterwards, already missing his voice. I know that my marriage is unsalvageable and that I'm doing the right thing, leaving it, even with a nagging feeling of guilt that's simmering beneath the surface, boiling over every now and then, waking me up at night, but I need to do this alone now. I want to look back with no regrets. The guilt will probably never going to go away entirely, but at least it won't have John's face now. He's not in the picture anymore. See, on Friday, John came home and broke off his marriage. I don't know all the details, but he didn't mention to her that he knew about her infidelity. Just that he wasn't happy anymore, didn't want to be married to her. He texted me and told me about him filing for a divorce from his wife. He is moving back to his hometown to be with his mother. He left yesterday, but he will be back once more to get the rest of his stuff. Even though I understand him, and even if I wasn't seeing him anymore, the city feels empty and gloomy without him.
What's the most insane true story you've ever heard? Happened a long time ago to my best friend. He disappeared for a time, and when he finally called me he said he had to spend some time out of town and was living in a motel. Mind you, he was mid-20s at the time. I asked him what had happened and he told me a rather long story of how he had married his wife when he was 17 and she was 20. At the time the only job he could find was working nights at a gas station. Like I said long time ago, a friend told him his wife was having a man come over to his home and spending the nights while he was at work. My buddy didn't believe it but decided to pretend to go to work, and after being gone around 15 minutes a car pulled up to his home and guy knocked on his door. His wife, dressed in lingerie, answered and pulled him inside. After the whole ordeal, he followed the guy back home with a few friends and forced himself inside, holding him at gunpoint. Apparently the only reason he didn't beat the man to death was because his friends pulled him off just in time. He went back home and ended it with his wife. She of course tried to deny it all even after being confronted with the evidence. Months pass and somehow, after a lot of begging and pleading, my buddy took his wife back, provided she stays faithful. A few years went by and he was doing well, had a good job and bought an older home, and they had a baby. He comes in from work and his wife and the baby are not home. Said he didn't think much of it as she was likely out shopping with her mother or girlfriends. Hours went by and he starts to get worried. By late in the evening he's imagining the worst case scenarios. Calls her mother, calls her girlfriends, and no one has seen her. Now he's thinking she's been in an accident and starts calling the police, all the hospitals, and nothing. Doesn't hear anything all night or the next day. Then the phone rings and it's one of his wife's girlfriends. Sobbing and breaking down, she tells him that his wife has been having an affair with a man and they were planning to do something horrible. I guess her conscience got the better of her. She told my buddy that they were planning to kill him, stage it as a self-inflicted wound, and then eventually move far away as a couple, and that the whole thing was basically orchestrated by the wife. She wanted to replace my buddy as revenge for ending her previous affair years ago. They had planned to off him in his own house that night, which is why she had called my buddy trying to save his life. My best friend was smart. He had immediately called the police, and told them about the plan. The police went over to the man's place to investigate, but were met with resistance by the man refusing to let them in. After a few hours and a search warrant served, they busted his door down. They found the man, the wife, stacks of fake passports and driving licenses, as well as high-caliber guns, knives, gallons of bleach, a huge tarp. They were caught red-handed. Hoping to get some kind of deal, the man confessed to everything. He had a terrible rap sheet, so combined with the intent to kill, he got 15 years in prison. At any rate, my friend filed for divorce and got the baby, house and pretty much everything. His wife got out of serving time as an accessory to murder by claiming she was afraid of the guy and he never left her alone. I think the judge knew it was a lie but had no proof, so he had to let her off. She moved across country, was never heard from again. My friend is doing better now, in his mid-30s with a stable job, loving girlfriend, and his son is about 12 now. What made the high school legend become a legend? Not my story, but my friends. My buddy went to a military boarding school for high school, very strict and regimented, with little to no tolerance for misbehavior. Multiple years of this environment must have pushed someone off the deep end, because during my buddy's second year, someone started shitting in urinals. Big, sloppy, shameless dookies. At least once a month for 3 years, these turds would appear. The culprit became known as the Phantom Shitter, and despite the efforts of a task force specifically assembled to put an end to the nefarious poops, the Phantom Shitter was never captured. This person became a legend at this boarding school because of their stealth, conviction, and utter lack of shame. My buddy kept in touch with one of his instructors over the years, and found out years later that a copycat shitter had briefly popped up. But he was discovered and expelled after only a couple dookies. He lacked the finesse of the mysterious original.
Empty everything from my bag? You got it. I work in a transportation facility which requires me to go through a security checkpoint that inspects bags and such, and you have to go through a metal detector. They require us to remove any electronics or wires from our bags. Since I'm a technician, I carry a laptop and network cables in my bag plus some small hand tools. I was told I can leave the hand tools in the bag but the wires and electronic have to be taken out. Fine, so I've been doing this for months. Until yesterday, I go through as usual, unpacking my bag of the required items and putting them in the bin and send it through. I send my bag afterwards. X-Ray says nothing, so I start reloading my bag. This is when X-Ray stops talking to her coworker friends and realizes she has to work. They start going through my bag, pulling out everything I just put back and telling me this is supposed to come out and go in a bin. I did. You weren't paying attention. X-Ray then proceeds to tell me anything metal has to come out. Everything has to come out. Fine. Today rolls around and the same person is running X-Ray. So I take all of my usual stuff out of my bag and put it in a bin. Then I start removing everything from my bag. Tissue pack? Check. Quick wipes? Check. Pens? Check. Candy wrapper from 3 days ago? Check. You get the point. Every single item I pulled from my bag. Meanwhile, X-Ray is getting testy and a line is forming behind me. X-Ray tells me I'm holding up the line. Sorry, you said everything. After my bins and empty bag go through the X-Ray and come out, I begin to repack everything while watching the line behind me. A guy is now doing the same thing I just did. Pulling everything from his bag. You did tell that guy everything. I don't want to get in trouble. The next guy behind him started doing it as well. As I set my bag on the floor and began to walk away, I turned to X-Ray and said, "You did say everything. Have a nice day." And left. I think I might go back through after lunch. Clarification. This is a security checkpoint for employees of this transportation facility. It's a private security company and not any government transportation security. Though most of them act like they work for the government. My girlfriend left me because I never met her father before he died. My girlfriend and I were together for almost 5 years. She had a rough childhood full of physical and emotional abuse by her father, and was very low contact with him for many years. She didn't want me meeting him for these reasons, and although at first I found it unusual, I was eventually okay with it. She told me the terrible, monstrous things he'd done to her and her mother, and I started hating this man. I thought he was a bad person and didn't deserve to have a family. Around 2 years ago, her father reached out to her. He had a come to Jesus moment and admitted all his wrongdoings in the past and wanted to try to have some sort of a relationship with his daughter. She wouldn't even hear him out at first, but after a drunken night of talking, after I told her some of my regrets with my own mother who died when I was a teenager, she decided to at least try and give it a shot. They started talking every once in a while, and their relationship seemed to be improving. It seemed as if he truly changed. My girlfriend was very cautious, and there were times she'd come to me in tears, but all in all, he was a lot different. It was basically as if his personality did a full 180. He was a lot calmer, more patient, more supportive and understanding. They rarely if ever had arguments, and he would often talk about his regrets in raising her, how sorry he was and how proud of her he was. However, she was still unsure about introducing me to him, because she was afraid he'd try to ruin it. I still hated his guts as I don't believe people ever truly change, so I didn't really mind that much. Around a year ago, her father was diagnosed with final stage brain tumor. It was a very confusing and overwhelming period for my girlfriend, and she would often wonder if the tumor was the reason for his sudden personality change. There were lots of tears, empathy and sadness, and she took it very badly. It was a total switch, considering that only a year before, she didn't care if he lived or died. This is when she started bringing up the idea of introducing me to him. She said he often asked about me and wanted to meet me, and she knew that I hated him, but it would mean a lot to her if I met him before he passed. He was in treatment and it was very hard on him. He was so weak, but she said she'd let me know when the right time comes. I said I'd be happy to, but once the day came, I was honestly too freaked out and super uncomfortable by the idea. I backed out and honestly told her that I'm just not ready. She wasn't angry. She said she understood and that it was fine. She said she wouldn't ask me again, and to let her know once I'm ready, and that was that. She never asked me again. The months passed and his condition was getting worse. She would update me on how he was doing, and I could see how hard she was taking it. She often talked about how she finally had her dad, and now he was being taken away from her. They knew the end was near when he started getting confused and wouldn't recognize anyone. He passed shortly after. My girlfriend was unusually calm when she called me. When I asked for funeral details, she just said she didn't bother to meet him when he was alive. Why bother now? She wouldn't give me the details and said she didn't want me there. So I didn't go. She was becoming distant in the following weeks, but I expected it. She was grieving. What I didn't expect was for her to break up with me. Her reasons were, I never made an effort to meet her father before he died. She said that in the year that he was dying, not once did I even try. She asked me several times and I said I'd do it, and once he was finally sane enough from all the treatment to meet me, I chickened out. She hoped I'd do it on my own terms, and I never did. And she knows that no matter what, she can never, ever forgive me for that. So she's leaving me. I don't know what's my excuse. I know she said she wouldn't ask again, and I know she was waiting for me to be ready for it. But I guess I was still waiting for her to ask. Had she asked just once after that, I swear on my life I would have done it. I just felt awkward and stupid to initiate it myself, and I admit it's my fault. I'm not trying to find a way to fix this because I know that I can't. I'm just so sorry. So sorry. Middle school teachers, what is the cringiest thing you've seen a student do? Had an 8th grade girl pretend to pass out because she was upset. She got written up for screaming that another girl was an effing B word in the middle of a science lesson. Then got upset when that other girl didn't also get in trouble for looking at her wrong. In the dean's office she was so upset that she pretended to faint, complete with back of the palm to the forehead and dramatic exhale, and then laid on the floor until we were forced to call an ambulance. Before the ambulance came, Mom walked in, she worked right across the street, and said, "Damn it, Jennifer, we're not doing this again." So evidently this was a regular happening around their house. At this point, the girl squinted her eyes open but refused to actually get up. When the squad got there, they checked her vitals and basically knew she was fine. They had to take her because we can't take chances with this stuff in schools. We all just kind of looked at each other and shrugged. Had a kid who legitimately believed he was a Sith. Like from Star Wars. His helicopter mom would come flying down to the school crying religious discrimination if you told him otherwise. He would relax his throat and talk in a deep voice and say it was his real voice, but he disguised his voice to not scare his human brethren. On free dress days he'd wear an all-denim outfit with high waters and denim vest over a denim shirt. I had him for science, so he'd blurt out things about alchemy from an anime he was into whenever we were working with the periodic table. He also had a girlfriend who lived in Mexico, who was also his cousin. One of my mother's students took a whole pizza in the box out of her office and just started eating. When told to stop and put it back, he licked the rest of the pizza and asked if he could have it. She said no and told him to throw it away. He started arguing that it was better in his stomach than in the trash. My mom was furious. My girlfriend wrecked 5 cars. Now, she wants me to buy her another car. My girlfriend and I have lived together for 4 years. At 20 I was lucky to be making quite a bit of money, and so I bought myself a new Jeep Wrangler as a second car to have fun with. My other car was my birthday present from my parents when I turned 18, 2017 Subaru Forester. My girlfriend's car was totaled right after we moved in together, so I let her use whichever of my cars I wasn't and put her on my insurance. She never ended up buying another car because she can't save money and has gotten comfortable in my new fancy cars compared to her '04 Camry. Now we get to the problem. She crashed both of them in a month. My Jeep just needed $4,500 of bodywork, but my Subaru was a total loss. She was 100% fine, no injuries whatsoever. She was at fault in both accidents. With the Jeep, she pulled out of a parking space too tight and scraped every panel from front to back and destroyed the other car. With the Subaru, she was texting and driving, so she hit a parked car at 25 miles per hour in our neighborhood. Now I get that accidents happen, but she took no responsibility for either accident. The Jeep is somewhat understandable, but to be texting and driving, something she knows I feel very strongly against, and not taking responsibility made me upset. So I told her it's fine, but I would be taking the insurance money for the Subaru and selling my Jeep after it was fixed. Then I would buy myself a new car, and that $5,000 of it would go to her to either buy a cheap used car or use as a down payment on something nicer. She said okay and nothing else really. The next Saturday when the Jeep was fixed, I did exactly what I said I was going to and bought myself a tricked out Volvo XC40. My girlfriend came home and went ballistic, saying she couldn't believe I didn't get her a car too. She said I wasted it buying such a nice car for myself. I told her with a $5,000 down payment you can pretty much buy exactly what we had before. Maybe a bit newer, but she was mad because she will have monthly payments and won't be able to afford everything for her skincare routine or be able to save to buy Christmas presents. The bit about presents for her family really made me feel like an a-hole, but it really is her own fault. She won't take accountability for it and has definitely taken advantage of my generosity. It's not every day that a person gives you $5,000 for a brand new car after wrecking 2. I even offered to help with the presents, but put my foot down on the car thing. She needed to have an asset in her name because if we ever broke up, she would need her own car. That set her off, and now she's more pissed at me than I ever was with her. I've had 2 cars wrecked, but she's more concerned that I don't see a life with her. At this point, I'm considering it because if you think about it, she's wrecked 5 cars. She's being irresponsible and I feel like she's trying to flip the switch on me. Making me feel bad that I'm rethinking our relationship, therefore apologizing to her with a brand new car. Maybe that's not her end goal, but she is staying at her mom's house right now and won't talk to me. It just feels manipulative to me, and if she can't even communicate with me properly, how are we going to have a stable relationship in the future? But anyway, update 2, I have a biological child who I've never seen wanting to make contact, which I don't want, but my family does. So basically I've decided to go to my parents' house at Christmas, when she's going to be there, and meet her. I honestly just decided it today. I've been talking to my mom about it all weekend and the past few days, and the more we talk openly it has made everything seem a bit more clear. I have worked out that despite the history attached and no matter our biology, she's just a little girl. So today, I was talking to my mom on my lunch break and we were discussing Christmas and how we'd do it logistically, as at this point, I was only going Boxing Day. When my mom mentioned Christmas dinner and playing me one up to warm up and eat at home, I just realized what's the point of avoiding everyone and sitting at home getting pissed and playing my PC with only my fish for company. So I went something like, yeah, why not, get enough for me and I'm coming Christmas Day too. She thought I was joking. When she realized I wasn't, I could tell in the tone of voice she was thrilled. She asked me if I realized the kid's still going and I said I do. She asked me how I feel. I said honestly I don't want to think about all that. I just want to go Christmas Day and spend it with my family. And if a young girl's there, I'll just be polite and respectful and treat her how I would any lonely young woman on Christmas Day. I asked her to let her know, and text her and see if she's also okay with that. She did, and in the short space of time on my call she got back to my mom really happy, saying of course it is and can't believe it. So that's it, I'm going. My mom texted me earlier saying she's so happy I'm coming and doesn't have to worry about me being on my own anymore. I sat there this afternoon feeling a bit relieved, and I'm also absolutely bloody terrified, but not in a bad way, more of a facing something uncertain way. I'm thinking of writing her another letter too. Nothing serious, just a bit about me to introduce myself and maybe ask her for one back.
Am I the a-hole for refusing to give my boyfriend's friend a ride? This past weekend my boyfriend went to a concert with a friend of his. My boyfriend didn't want to drive downtown and deal with parking. He also wanted to have a few drinks during the show, so he asked me if I would be willing to come pick them up after the show because it would be peak Uber time and a ride would be expensive. He said they would Uber to the show since it would be cheaper at that time of day. I also hate driving downtown because there are a lot of one-way streets and it's always busy. I was hesitant to agree, but my boyfriend reminded me of how he was the designated driver for me and my friends on 3 separate occasions over the summer, and this is the first time he's asking this sort of thing from me. I felt like I had to agree even though I really didn't want to. He texted me right after the show ended and gave me a location a couple blocks from the arena so that traffic would be slightly less busy. When I got there, it was obvious his friend had too much to drink. You could tell immediately by looking at him that he was wasted. My boyfriend wasn't much better, but he was at least holding himself together. I told my boyfriend that I don't want to give his friend a ride because he looks like he's about to puke and I don't want to deal with that in my car. This is the first new car I've ever had even though it's used. I just got it this spring and I'm trying really hard to take good care of it. The last thing I want is for it to smell like vomit forever. My boyfriend tried to argue with me that his friend isn't going to puke and that it's just a 20-minute drive home. I told him I would take my boyfriend, but not his friend because I'm not risking it. My boyfriend said he wasn't not just going to leave his friend here like that and slammed the door in my face. He grabbed his friend and started walking away. I rolled down the window and tried to yell after him, but he just put his hand up over his head and kept walking. I tried to follow them to talk sense to my boyfriend, but my boyfriend saw me and cut down an alley onto a one-way and I lost them. I tried calling and texting but he didn't answer or respond. I headed home. When I got home I kept calling my boyfriend and texting to make sure he was okay but he still didn't respond. Finally, the next morning he texted me back. He said they got an Uber to his friend's house that was over $100. I told him that I'm glad they're okay and he wrote back, yeah, no thanks to you. That started a fight because I kept defending my decision to not take his intoxicated friend and my boyfriend argued that he would never leave one of my friends like that no matter what. I reminded him that I didn't want to give them a ride in the first place and he basically manipulated me into it and that it's not my fault his friend got too intoxicated. He said that he now feels like he can't rely on me because of something that might happen. I told him he's making me feel like a jerk and he told me good, because you were one. He's now ignoring me.
You should always pay your accountant, especially if you've got skeletons in your closet. My buddy is an accountant, he has his own firm. His biggest clients are small to medium-sized businesses. Well, he had a client who owned 4 different clubs/bars in 2 different cities. Client was always shady, always slow on payment, etc. I was also a customer of one of the bars. They had poker game that I would play in on Thursdays. Well, one day I'm at my buddy house, having a few beers and he's beaching about non-payment from a client. I ask who, he doesn't want to say, but it's really bugging him because it's a significant chunk of change. He then says the name, we'll call him Scott. I'm like, wow, Scott isn't paying you? He then says Scott is saying business is way down and I think that's odd. I've been going to one Scott place and every Thursday is packed. My buddy looks at me and goes, really? I go, yeah, he does this new cash discount thing, 15% off your tab if you pay cash. My buddy goes, really? I tell him about my experience at Scott Bar, and eventually the topic changes. A few weeks later my buddy calls me up and says, you going to Scott's Bar to play poker? I said, yeah. He says, can I join? I go, sure. He joins, we get a few drinks in us, lose our money at poker. My house is closer, he decides to crash there. On the way over he breaks down his theory. He thinks Scott is vastly underreporting his revenue. The reason why he suspects Scott is offering cash discount is cause cash is easier to hide. He says he's going to do a deep dive on Scott's finances. My friend tells me his plan is to go all 4 of Scott's establishments, get the prices he charges at each place, pieces together how much alcohol he's buying, versus how much Scott is saying his revenue equates to. He looks up how much Scott is paying in payroll, rent, bills, etc. Keep in mind he has access to all this info, and he determines that Scott is basically using his credit card receipts plus a little bit of cash to cover his cost of his business to include rent, payroll, insurance, liquor, food, etc. However, based upon the amount of products he's selling, he's suspecting Scott is underreporting his total income by about 35% to 40%. He goes back into Scott's books even more, and he figures in the last year Scott has been underreporting his sales by 35% to 40%, but he's also been underreporting his sales by at least 20% to 25% for years on end. Simply put, there is no way Scott is going through as much product and as much alcohol as he's purchasing and having the revenue numbers that he's claiming. He's underreporting his sales to his accountant, which means he's also underreporting his earnings to the IRS. By this point, Scott owes my friend thousands of dollars that he hasn't paid. He said his total amount could buy a brand new motorcycle. He never gave me an exact number. My friend decides fuck getting repayment from Scott. Let's get repayment from the IRS through the whistleblower program. He's estimating Scott's underreported his revenue by millions of dollars over the course of years. The whistleblower fees he'd earned from the IRS far outweighs the amount Scott owes him. The IRS will pay between 15 to 30% of what they collect. So with the assistance of a lawyer, my friend gathers all the evidence he has of Scott's underreporting to the IRS and files a whistleblower report with the IRS. During this time, my friend fires Scott as a client for non-payment. Now this part gets boring cause there's a lot of legal wrangling and back and forth. This went back and forth. However, eventually the IRS comes down on Scott, and they come down hard. It's estimated that Scott underreported his income to the IRS by about $4.5 million. Now my friend never told me how much the IRS was able to recoup, but Scott's businesses are no longer his businesses, and $4.5 million would put the whistleblower reward at $675K, $1.3 million. Keep in mind it's based on what the IRS collects, not the amount that's reported. I've asked my friend how much he got in the end, and he simply says I no longer have a mortgage, and it would have been much cheaper for Scott to just pay me. Fairly aggressive girlfriend stole from my bank account, so I sent her academic career into a nosedive. I'm a senior at a large state university. This happened in the first semester of my freshman year. I was selected for an honors-type program that placed me in a co-ed dorm building with every other student in the program. As a dumb freshman, I rushed into a relationship with a freshman girl who lived right above me. We'll call her Megan. It was convenient for me to date someone who lived so close, but everyone else in our building hated Megan because she talked a lot, and almost exclusively about herself. She bragged often about being a fairly aggressive person, but somehow I overlooked that mile-wide red flag. Right after Thanksgiving break, at the end of an evening class, I got a call from my mom, who noticed some unusual activity on my checking account. Back then I had no credit card, so this account/debit card was my only access to my savings while I lived on campus. I rarely needed to buy anything during the semester, so I was puzzled to find that $104.29 had left my bank account over 2 weeks, in the form of 6 Grubhub food orders. At this point, I trusted Megan, but I decided to ask her about the money right away. She denied any involvement and suggested that I cancel my debit card. After a really long phone call to the bank, I did just that. Next, I reached out to Grubhub customer service on Twitter. Hey, my card was stolen and used for food orders on these dates. Can I have the receipts? They sent me the first and last receipts, but they had to redact the personal info of the account holder. I say redact in quotes because they just used the Snapchat draw tool, and Megan's name was still clearly visible on both receipts. What's more, the most recent receipt was only 2 hours old. She was probably still eating when I chopped up my debit card. It's worth noting that she and I both had unlimited dining plans, paid for by our respective parents, and we lived 500 feet from the nearest dining hall. She didn't need to order food, and she definitely didn't need my money to do it. So I texted her again. I have the receipts from Grubhub. Are you sure you didn't make those orders? Her reply, fuck you for suspecting me. Fairly aggressive, wouldn't you say? I hatched a plan to collect security camera footage of her picking up the order from that evening. However, by midnight, Megan arrived at my door in tears and confessed to everything, plus she admitted to being a serial shoplifter. Exhausted, I sent her away and decided to deal with everything in the morning. By the next day, everyone in our building seemed to know what was going down, probably because Megan had already begun broadcasting her version of the story. I sent Megan a breakup text and decided that the $104.29 was a loss. At least I escaped unscathed, right? Well, less than 2 days later, she entered my room when I wasn't looking. I was sitting at my desk when I noticed her standing silently behind me. Megan, give me my stuff. Where's my stuff? Me, what stuff? Megan, I did not know. She tore through the room, looking for something that she refused to identify. Just as quick as she came, she was gone, and I locked the door because obviously this wasn't over yet. Within a minute, she was back. She stood outside my door, knocking and demanding I let her back inside. The knocking quickly got more violent. She started shouting, I know you're fuck ing in there. And opened the mother ing door. Mind that we lived in this building with students in our program who all know each other, and all of them could hear her. Pretty quickly, Megan was rattling the handle of my door. Next, she began throwing herself at it, shoulder first, trying to break it down. I lived next door to my RA, but judging by the lack of any intervention, he was elsewhere. So I whipped out my phone and texted him to send backup. Meanwhile, I saw my heavy wooden door bending and buckling. I even heard it crack a bit. My RA was on duty in another building, so he sent 3 of his colleagues to de-escalate the situation. They brought Megan downstairs, where she revealed that the stuff she wanted was just the t-shirt and keychain that she gave me for my birthday. Whatever, I let her have those. I still just wanted this to be over. However, once I shared my story with the resident life staff, they filed university paperwork to place a no-contact order between me and Megan. They also recommended I contact the campus police, who then told me I should get my stolen money back in small claims court. I couldn't even get there without a car or money to pay for an Uber. Sorry, Judge Judy. At the request of the campus police, I also contacted the Title IX office at my school, sending them the story of everything you've read so far. They were interested, to say the least, although I didn't want any trouble. I just wanted a clean breakup and a fresh start. But a Title IX representative informed me that they were bringing 3 misconduct charges against Megan: theft, threatening/violent behavior, and inciting an intervention by university staff. The representative asked me to serve as a witness in Megan's disciplinary hearing the next semester. I tentatively agreed, right before the representative set the hearing date for February 14th, Valentine's Day. I thought it was a joke, but they really did that. When the day of the hearing finally arrived, the no-contact order was still in effect, but a few of my friends had kept tabs on Megan. For starters, she failed all of her classes in the fall. Someone in my math course confessed that Megan had tried to sleep with him while she was dating me, and he had to repeatedly tell her no. Even worse, Megan kept telling a twisted version of the whole story to try and turn my friends against me. So when I found out that she had found a new boyfriend, it felt good to know that the V-Day disciplinary hearing ruined whatever evening plans they might have made. I arrived alone at the disciplinary board office, unsure what to expect. The board consisted of grad students, and the hearing was expected to run into the night. Unlike me, Megan did not come alone. She brought both of her parents as character witnesses. That wasn't even a thing here. This wasn't a real courtroom, as you'll soon see. And that's not all. Megan's parents also paid a lawyer to defend her against the charges. The board knew that was unnecessary, but Megan's parents believed so strongly in their daughter's innocence that they had already paid this 3-piece suit maker case. In the name of fairness, the board members offered me pro bono legal representation, a junior economics major, who we'll call Jimmy. Jimmy had already read my account of the events from the fall, and thanks to my screenshots of Grubhub receipts, he said there was an okay shot of the charges sticking. Then I told him something I'd kept secret for months. When Megan tried to break down my door and I whipped out my phone to text my RA, I also filmed the whole thing. Jimmy couldn't get enough of the video. There was Megan, kicking and screaming and clearly trying to break into my dorm room. It was all the evidence I needed, and no one saw it coming. In the hearing, when the time came for me to make the case against Megan, Jimmy played the video on a big screen in front of everyone. The room went insane. In that instant, I realized that Megan really had convinced everyone I was the liar. In her version of the story, I gave her permission to buy food using my account. She told her parents that she'd asked me politely for her belongings, which I'd rudely hidden from her in my dorm room. In Megan's story, I was the sociopath trying to ruin her reputation. Before I unveiled the video, it was her word against mine. I still didn't want revenge, even after finding out that Megan tried to cheat on me. But when I saw her parents flipping out at the video, "Why didn't you tell us you did this?" And her lawyer raising hell, this evidence was not provided in pretrial disclosure. And a board member standing over him, "Sir, this is not a court of law. Please return to your seat," and him shouting objection. And her replying, "We don't have objections, this isn't a court of law," and Jimmy, my new best friend, just trying not to laugh out loud. That's when I realized how good revenge can feel when it's fair and deserved. The board found Megan responsible on all 3 charges. My side of the bench recommended the university terminate her housing contact and force her to pay restitution. Her side recommended only restitution and a reprimand. The board compromised. Her family paid back most of the money she stole, most because 2 of the 6 orders had the same price, and the lawyer convinced the board I had duplicated an order, and Megan was forced to move into a different dorm building. This probably would have helped her anyway, because every student in our program's building knew everything she'd done and lied about. They wouldn't speak to her, and no one wanted to be her roommate. By the time she had to move buildings, she'd already failed all of her courses again. Having paid for her tuition, her unused dining plan, her lawyer, and her restitution, Megan's parents finally pulled her out of school. Where are they now? Last I heard, Megan returned as a part-time student, but I never saw her again because the no-contact order still stands. I'm now Facebook friends with the guy Megan tried to seduce. Oh, and Jimmy and I connected on LinkedIn. As for me, well, I no longer date fairly aggressive people.
My amazing nanny is strict to her diet, and now she always has a comment on what we eat, and I hate it. We had a pandemic baby, and we decided for safety reasons it was better to be exposed to one person, a nanny, versus the potentially hundreds in a daycare setting. The expense for even 40 hours of her time is a tight squeeze for us, but we found someone who is overall fantastic. Our baby does amazing with her. She's knowledgeable, experienced, helpful, and taking the kinds of precautions we need and expect. I manage people at work but have never had in-home help until now, and I have no role models for this, because we are just not of an income bracket where I've ever been around nannies. She feels different than someone I would manage at work because the lines blur a lot. She's in our home, caring for our baby, and eating lunch with us. We also can't afford to lose her. There just aren't that many folks who fit our needs out there right now. The issue is this: she's lost some serious weight. I'm talking 100 plus pounds, and she's still going. I'm happy for her because she seems happy about it, and I understand the commitment to change like that can be all-consuming. That said, she comments on every single food we eat and bring into our house, and not favorably. While we eat reasonably healthfully and are active in healthy weights, we do have junk food in our house, and not every meal is perfectly balanced and nutritious. As a working mom, my priority is first ease and second cost. Nutrition matters too, but it's definitely not the only consideration. Also, we have a new baby in a pandemic. Every night I cook, it all feels heroic, and we eat some treats only because they're tasty. I've tried hinting, we eat everything in moderation here, or we want to teach baby that foods aren't good or bad, and all bodies are good bodies. And finally, I can't really talk about food and weight this much, it's not healthy for me. She doesn't get it. I sort of lost it when I saw her snap a photo of our snack drawer, presumably to show someone what pigs we are, but I didn't say anything because I needed to work. Update: I had a conversation with her where I said that the focus on our food choices felt uncomfortable for me. She was honestly very vulnerable in sharing that she was able to lose so much weight by simply never giving herself access to any treats, and being in our home was very disorienting to her. She definitely had some fears that she was projecting, and I probably also had some insecurities that didn't mix well there. After talking, she definitely was able to reflect and see how this came across, and we talked about shared expectations around food. I mentioned that I would be happy to keep any treats she found inordinately distracting out of the line of sight, and away from the food she and the baby were accessing. I also mentioned that I would always include her in our grocery and meal planning, and make sure we had options that were appealing to her and fit her goals. We also talked about food and diet around the baby as she became more verbal, and she really seemed to understand. We also talked about photos taken in our home and the parameters for sharing them, as well as just discussing our family with anyone else. It did turn out that the photos she took were so she could investigate how they fit into her diet, something she didn't want to spend time doing at work. I have not seen her do that again. We don't always execute this perfectly, but I think that conversation set a good baseline, and we can return to those mutually agreeable principles whenever this is out of alignment. She's been an amazing nanny, and I would hate to have made a hasty decision based on behavior I didn't fully understand.
I unalived my friend with a strobe light. They still haven't caught me. It was October, my junior year of college, and per usual, my friend had a Halloween party that was hosted at my house. Everyone was dressed up accordingly. There were goblins, vampires, slutty cats, slutty dogs, slutty sluts, characters from movies like Grease and Star Wars. One dude was a hobbit and another dude was the F her right and the pussy guy from all those YouTube videos. I was dressed up as a medieval knight, which came with the hood, fake chainmail, a sword, the whole nine. On my chest were the words "a night to remember." When people came up to me and asked, "Hey Rivy, why are you a night to remember?" I would immediately lift my gown to the side to reveal a 3-foot-long plush penis accompanied with a saggy set of balls. I waved the effing thing around like a flag, chased my friends with it, shrieked when it got caught in a door, and plopped in on the beer pong table to distract my opponents from hitting cups. It was a riot and everyone had a good laugh. Later on in the night, many more people ended up coming through than predicted, so I needed to get everything poppin'. The living room was the dance floor and the main area everyone hung out in, so I had to think of something cool to get the juices flowing. In the back of the room, I saw that one of my big strobe lights was there but not on. I plugged it in, flipped the switch, and everyone cheered at the rapidly blinking lights as they flashed throughout the room. I danced for a few minutes before heading to the kitchen to grab another beer. During my travels, I saw my frat brother, Jafar, sitting in a chair with perfect posture staring blankly into space. I asked him if he wanted a beer. No response. "Are you alright, bud?" I said as I pat him on the shoulder. No response. I waved the plush penis around. Still no response. I looked over at my friends who are sitting across from me and they said he's been like that for the last few minutes. All of a sudden I heard the loudest scream I think I've ever heard in my life. It sounded like a man being held down by a gang of demons as Satan slowly inserts centipedes inside his urethra. I turned around to see Jafar on the floor shaking and screaming. The whole party stopped and turned to look at this kid wildly seizing. The music gets turned off, lights go on, and a bunch of us approach Jafar to try and help. Then it dawns on me. Jafar is a photosensitive epileptic and my dumbass forgot and turned a strobe light on. We comforted him as best as we could and made sure he wouldn't injure himself or anyone nearby. I noticed a small puddle of blood forming behind Jafar's head, so he must have hit it on the ground. Obviously, we called an ambulance and rapidly started cleaning up the house of any illegal substances just in case the cops were to come too. In 5 minutes what went from a house being riddled with beer cans, cups, trash and substances turned into the cleanest it's ever been. Every person in attendance helped clean and throw stuff away. The paramedics arrived and began to address the situation. Jafar finally settled down and talked to medics. He said he was fine but still had to go to the hospital. One paramedic asked what happened and me, still dressed in my costume with PP and balls dangling, said yay, some a-hole turned a strobe light on. In the end, Jafar was alright but needed some stitches and time off from class. The party got broken up early and everyone went home. Jafar ended up dying that night. Some people were pissed at me for not owning up to my mistake, but I was too nervous to admit to killing my friend. A stranger's message and 9 lives. One day I decided to go visit the bridge of Khazad Dam in the local park near my house. I was sick of everything so I jumped, ready to die. I had plunged about a 5-story drop when I felt a thud on my back. I expected to hit the ground, but all suddenly I stopped falling. I understand that a rescue rope or something was holding me and began to freak out. I could totally see the people on the bridge and the crowd on the hill that was formed to see what was happening. They were calling my name, but I was too ashamed to respond. All these people knew me. Everyone thought I was quiet and upstanding person when in reality I was just another average teen with depression. Another increasingly frayed rope comes down from the top of the bridge, but it was too short. I couldn't reach it to grab it. All of a sudden a man I didn't recognize dropped off of the top of the bridge off a steep slope dive with the outstretched hand directly above the hand that I was holding with. The man grabbed the other hand and threw a rope down to my friends. Other people had come to help me, to save my life. They got me down safely and the man who grabbed my hand came over. My friends tried to stop him, but he said he was the universal sovereign and I didn't have to die today. I was confused as to what he was saying, but I just let him go. Who was I to fight back a man who saved my life? I let him go. I listened to his message and he told me that I had 9 lives. He could see all that I had done and that the moment in the future that I needed those lives the most was now. I had so many lives left, but I was too afraid to use them. The life that I was living now was short and pathetic, but when I was needed I could go to great lengths to protect what I cared for. I thought about it and he was right. I had failed and become a shell of a person, but I still had unconditional love in my family's heart. They would still welcome me back despite my lack of effort, and more than anything I wanted my friends back. They all told me that they forgave and what happened to me wasn't my fault. I started to cry and the man came over and pet my hair just like my mother would and said it's time to go home. I nodded and let my friends escort me away. As we walked we must have passed him, but he didn't stop us and continued on. Eventually we got to the gate to the park and I told them I had to go to the restroom. I went into a stall and found a business card on the ground. The card read talk2help.org. I knew it was the man and went home. I am alive today because of this stranger and I respect what he did. His message still resounds through my mind. I am never alone and I still have 9 lives, and I'll use them. CPS workers, what is the worst case you have ever seen? Back in my mid-late 20s, I worked as a CPS agent. Specifically, I was the type to be sent to scope out living areas to see if it was suitable for the child. I think the worst living situation I've seen was this. So, I got called to this place. The report states that the house this family is living in isn't suitable for the child. It's pretty vague, so I will go to the place. It's a really small house in the middle of nowhere, Texas. This house looked like it had been abandoned for the last 100 years. It was essentially just the husk of a house. Rotting wood, barely stable. There isn't really a front door or front wall, so I let myself in. I'm really confused, because there's no way anyone could live here. There's no cars, no signs of life. I decide to walk around the outside of the house to make sure. In the distance, I can see something that doesn't look like it belongs in a Texas desert. I walk towards it, a good mile away. I get closer and notice that it's a tent. Actually, it's 3 tents all next to each other. Shitty tents at that. There's a bicycle leaned against one of them that's missing a wheel. There's trash everywhere. Mostly beer cans and cigarette butts. There's also plenty of food wrappers, hypodermic needles and what appears to be used toilet paper. The area smells atrocious. I approach the front of the biggest tent, and can hear people's voices coming from it. The voices have thick southern accents, and they sound weak for lack of a better word. I can only make out 2 distinct voices. They both sound like adults. I stand in front of the tent and just say hello, anybody home? I understandably scared them, because I hear what the F come from the inside of the tent. A very skinny looking man, likely in his late 20s, unzips the tent. He is completely naked, and is holding a small, beat-up kitchen knife. He looks high out of his mind. He asks very politely, who the female are you? From inside the tent, I can see that there is a woman crouched in the corner of the tent, also high out of her mind. I couldn't even tell if she was fully conscious, but the baby she was nursing certainly was. I said hello, my name is Agent, name, and I work with, City, Youth Protection Services. I've been called here about a poor living situation regarding children. Sir, do you have any children here with you? I'm extremely scared at this point. I'm in the middle of the desert, and the only item of self-defense I have is a taser. I try to keep my composure though. He lowers his knife and steps out of the tent. Still completely naked. He said, F-man, thought you were here with the government here to take my kids and firearms away. I'll give you a tour of the place if you want. I'm dumbfounded at this point, but I follow him as he walks over to unzip one of the other tents. Inside I see 2 children. One is unresponsive, laying face down in the corner of the tent, looks to be around 5 to 6 years old. The other one looks to be around 8 to 9, and is laying in the other corner playing with a Walkman without a tape or headphones in it. I asked him if it was okay to ask his kids a few questions. He said they don't talk much, but sure. I poked my head into the tent and asked the kid playing with the Walkman and asked, hey, what's your name? He didn't answer. I asked his assumed father if it's alright if I tap him on the shoulder to get his attention. He said sure, so I did. The kid looked at me with a blank expression on his face. I can immediately tell that this kid has severe developmental problems. I ask, hey friend, what's your name? He doesn't respond. I then tap the other kid who's laying face down on a blanket. He turned over and his face was completely covered in bruises. Looked like he straight up went through a fight club. I asked him what his name was. He said Devin. I asked him where all of the bruises came from. He looked at his dad, then went back to going face down into the blanket and started sobbing. I couldn't get his attention anymore. I stood up from the tent and looked at the father. I asked him what was in the other tent. We started walking over to it. As we did, I noticed this horrible smell coming from it. He unzipped it and I saw a girl, who couldn't have been older than 4. There is a corner of the tent that is lower than the rest of it. It is full of urine. Like, to ground level, just full of urine. She's in the corner of the tent playing with some dolls. I stand up, tell the man that I'll be right back, just have to grab something from my car. I return to my car and call the local police. I tell them who I am and what the situation is. They asked if I felt safe stalling until the police showed up. I said yes. I talked to the father about not much in particular. I asked him why he thought the government was coming for his kids and firearms. He went on this long incoherent rant about how ever since he moved here, he feared that he was going to lose his firearms. I asked him where he kept the guns. He said he kept them under the floorboards in the rotting house. Around this time, the police showed up. 3 patrol cars full of cops drove out to the tents. The man didn't even turn around or notice until one of the officers told us to put our hands up and drop to our knees. They get processed. The kids get put in foster care. As it turns out, the couple were biological siblings, and heavy meth/heroin/crack users. My brother cheated on his wife with one of my friends last night, at my place. I'm 32, a guy. There's this girl I knew way back in the day, McKenna, she's 31. We reconnected. She came over last night to hang out along with a few other people. This wasn't a rager, nobody was getting blackout drunk or doing anything more than smoking W. My brother swung by. My brother is 37, married for 10 years with 2 kids. Him and my friend started talking. By the end of the night I don't know where they went, I figured they both just left. Woke up this morning and walk into my guest bedroom, and there's my brother with McKenna, in bed. I'm not one to stick my nose into other people's shite, but my brother's never been their cheating type. Now his wife is texting me asking if I know where he is. It's early so I can ignore her for now, but damn did I not expect this. Update. Yeah, so I woke up my brother and was like, what the F? So it turns out my brother had come by my house last night, before he realized I had people over, to tell me that he had found out that his wife was texting and sending exposed pictures to other guys. So he told her they were done and came over to crash at my place, drank too much and hooked up with my friend. Pawn shop owners, what was the best reaction you have seen out of someone that tried to sell you something that was completely worthless? I would like to share the opposite. Girls thought they had worthless cards, ended up being very worthwhile. I worked in a comic book shop that also sold trading cards. In this case, Magic, the Gathering. 2 young girls came in, maybe 14-15 years old, with a small box of cards. They said they found it on their uncle's closet that passed away, figured it was worthless, and just wanted to see the worth. I thought the same, and opened up the box of cards to take a quick glance and was a little alarmed at what I saw: alpha and beta cards, a couple of power 9 cards, and this was just the first 10 cards in. I stopped, said, I'm really sorry, I'm not familiar with these older cards. I lied, I just wasn't authorized to try to buy something of this magnitude. I'll need to call the store owner. I called him, and at first he was annoyed because the other store he was visiting had a Ford plow through the front window. He just said to not bother with a trade-in, until I causally mentioned some of the cards there in the stack. He said, don't let those cards leave the building. I'm on my way, and hung up. The girls couldn't wait, and I asked if they wouldn't mind leaving the cards with me, along with their names and phone numbers, and we could get back to them. When the owner came in, he went to the back, got some gloves, and went through all the cards. I stayed after my shift because I just wanted to see it unfold. The owner gained like 10,000 respect points from me when the girls and an older woman, presumably somebody's mother, came back in, as he was straight with them. He said, what you have here is all very worthwhile. There isn't a card in this box that would sell for less than about $5. But these cards here, he fanned out some cards that I couldn't see, are the most valuable in the box. And this one, B pulled a card away, would sell for the price of these, and the entire box, at least twice as much. I do not have enough money available to make you a fair offer. What you have here is easily worth about $20,000 to a collector. The girls' mouths dropped open. The owner offered them everything he had available in the shop, about $6,000. They accepted. Surviving sexual abuse from my disabled brother. Warning, NSFW. Content warning, the following post discusses sensitive and potentially triggering topics. As a child, something traumatic happened to me in my own bed at the hands of my brother, whom I'll refer to as Chris. It is important to note that Chris is autistic and has difficulty with communication. I didn't take any action at the time because of his limitations and the fact that he is often treated like a child. Years later, now in my mid-20s, my partner, Scott, 24M, and I found ourselves in a difficult situation where we had to move into my parents' house. Our previous apartment was condemned, and we couldn't afford rent elsewhere. To add to our difficulties, Scott was dealing with physical disabilities and chronic pain, leaving him unable to work. At my parents' house, we didn't have a dedicated room and ended up sleeping in the open basement. It was there that Chris once again touched me, and he also touched Scott while he was sleeping. These incidents were accompanied by other intimate inappropriate behavior that occurred almost daily. Chris would have episodes where he would masturbate aggressively while chasing Scott, or would engage in inappropriate behavior such as jerking it on our bed while we were away, or trying to touch us inappropriately. Having accumulated the courage, I eventually talked to my parents about Chris's behavior, as well as explaining the past incidents. It was an incredibly challenging conversation. While my parents acknowledged that the behavior was concerning, their sympathy was limited. They emphasized Chris's lack of understanding what is right and wrong, urging us not to hold it against him. In hopes of curbing Chris's behavior, I suggested that he try taking antidepressants, as we had previously discussed the idea that he may be depressed. The medication did help to some extent, but it didn't eliminate the inappropriate behavior entirely, particularly towards Scott. We have since managed to move out, though not entirely on our own terms. Due to my inability to purchase a home by myself, my stepfather became our landlord. As a result, our whole family, including Chris, frequently visits whenever there are maintenance issues with the house. Furthermore, They have been urging me to spend time with Chris for an afternoon each week as a form of gratitude for my stepfather purchasing the house for us. However, I am deeply reluctant to see Chris. Scott regularly experiences nightmares about him, and so do I. The incidents have taken a toll on our relationship, making it incredibly difficult for Scott and me to reconnect. I fear that this might be the breaking point for us. I am at a loss and overwhelmed with grief, especially considering the additional hardships and traumas Scott has already endured in his life. In this time of pain, I find myself unsure of how to begin the healing process.
I overheard my husband talking about me. His co-workers, both women, came over, so I said hi, spent some time with them, and after some time went to my room to take a nap. As a maybe semi-important piece of context, my self-esteem is so low it's already great friends with the dust on the floor. My husband knows this. At one point, he entered the room that's next to ours to look for something with one of the co-workers. That's where I keep my sketchbooks, notebooks and books. I heard she was taking a look at my stuff, and my man started saying things like, yeah, she also draws nicely, and her style is super unique. Those are her books, she's so smart and talented, I'm so lucky to have her. Then they left, and my heart was absolutely melting. Neither of us has mentioned it, so I kept it as my little secret. He'll read this eventually cause he checks out my Reddit profile now and then, but I wanted to share it. I just love to hear that's the way he talks about me when I'm not there with him.
I can't believe what I found on my brother's computer. I'm 22F. I have two brothers. 25 meters, Bryson, and 32 meters, Jake. Jake found out his ex-wife had been cheating on him about a year and a half ago. They didn't have any kids, so the divorce was simple. Around the time their divorce was finalized, Jake started dating Melanie, 24F. Melanie has been friends with Bryson since middle school. He's never said it out loud, but it's been obvious that he's had a thing for her for a very long time, and his feelings were never reciprocated. At least, it's obvious to me. Maybe it's not obvious to other people. Anyway, Jake and Melanie have been dating at this point for about 9 months. As far as I know, Bryson has never said anything about it, and has never acted like he had an issue with it. They go to family events all the time, he's friendly with both of them, acts totally normal. Here's the weird part. My laptop broke, and I needed to attend a meeting for work, so I asked my brother Bryson if I could borrow his laptop. He said sure and lent it to me. At one point, I accidentally minimized the window when I was looking for it. I accidentally opened up a folder that he had minimized, but not closed all the way out. It was filled, absolutely filled, with every picture, post, comment that Melanie has ever put on social media. There are pictures of her where it doesn't look like she's looking, pictures of her taken far away, pictures of her from years and years ago. It was a lot. Like seriously, a lot of these pictures. I didn't want to be nosy, so I didn't look that much, but I saw enough to know that it was a lot. Is he stalking her? I definitely don't think this is normal. Who do I tell? I don't want him to think I was snooping on purpose, but at the same time, it was strange. What do I do?
Am I the a-hole for telling my daughter that I expect her to move out when she turns 18? I am 42 years old and the mother of a 16-year-old daughter. She's a good kid, but recently something came up that has almost completely obliterated our once perfect relationship. My daughter is an incredibly sweet, smart girl, and she has plenty of friends and does exceptionally well in school. She has always helped out in the house and has stayed close to me and my husband since she was a child. I love her with all my heart, but even before I got pregnant I knew what kind of parent I was going to be. I had been raised in a very specific, slightly strict way, and I grew up into a well-adjusted woman, therefore I knew I would raise my daughter the same way. The issue came up this week when I was picking up my daughter from volleyball practice. She was telling me about how one of her best friends had had a fight with her parents, and she was saying she was grateful that we never fought like that. I asked her what the fight was about, and she said that her best friend's mom had told her that she was sick of her and she wanted her out as soon as she turned 18. My daughter went on to say that she couldn't imagine having a mom who would say that right to her child's face, and that she was happy that I had always been caring towards her and never yelled at her. At first, I was touched that my daughter was so grateful for our close relationship and appreciated my parenting style. But then I realized that we had a misunderstanding. In the most soothing way possible, I admitted to my daughter that I also expected her to move out as soon as she was 18. I proceeded to tell her that my parents packed my bags the night before my 18th birthday and expected me to move out and support myself since I was a legal adult. I told her about how I was able to manage and I paid my own rent and supported myself through school when I was an 18-year-old in the 80s. I rented a studio apartment and worked as hard as I could, unlike kids these days, lol. My daughter had been quiet with a confused look on her face as I talked through this. Afterward, she was silent. I told her, honey, I'm not trying to be mean, but this is what's expected in our family. At one point you have to learn how to be your own adult, and the government says that you are ready to do that at that 18. She stayed silent for a good minute before turning to me and asking, why don't you want me? I told her that would raise her with all the love I had until I didn't have to anymore, and that even though I still cared about her, she needed to stand on her own 2 feet. Ever since that day, my daughter has not wanted to spend any time with me. We don't talk much anymore, and when we do talk she just gives me one-word answers. We used to go out together all the time. I would take her shopping and we had weekly movie nights. But now she's taken all of that away from me overnight, and I don't understand what's changed. It's like that one conversation completely erased our entire relationship. The thing is, I don't feel like sitting her down and asking her what's wrong. It's obvious that she's mad at me for wanting to kick her out at 18 years old, she just doesn't understand that's the norm in the US.
The woman I married is not the woman I have loved the most. I have been with my wife for 14 years. She is an amazing spouse, partner, and mother. She is a great woman and I'm happy with the beautiful family we've made. That being said, my one true love is a woman I was with right before I met my wife. This woman and I dated for 3 years. She changed my life with her love. She introduced me to so much. When we were together everything was electric. I could listen to her talk for hours and was just enthralled by her. She was the only person I trusted enough to pour my heart out to. Even my wife I can't do this with. She was my perfect match. Compatible in every way. No one has made me laugh like her, made me feel pure unadulterated happiness as her. And I have never been with a lover that I have felt as physically and emotionally connected as her. If there are soulmates, she was mine. In the short time we were together we planned out our lives, together forever. Unfortunately, she needed to leave the country. Her parents were in an accident killing her father and leaving her mother in need of care. I was serving military commitment fresh out of college and I couldn't go with her. We tried to make it work but when it became clear we wouldn't be together for another 3 years, she became more withdrawn after the accident and resented me for not being able to be with her. I could feel the separation was slowly destroying us, so I set her free. It broke me but it seemed like the best thing for both of us. I don't think I'll ever forget our time together. As much as I love my wife, I know the love between us is not as real as me and my ex's love. I married my wife out of convenience and I grew to love her. A few years back I got into contact with my ex again. She is married too with kids but she has also never forgotten and is still in love with me and wishes things could have been different. We talk sometimes, nothing is ever inappropriate. I of course would choose my wife and family over her any time, but if I saw her in person again, I'd be lying if I said I wouldn't be worried something inappropriate might happen. My pregnant wife is scarred and therefore less valuable because she defended me from a fatal attack. Please validate my need to cheat on her. I tried speaking to a therapist and they made me feel so low I haven't gone back since. My wife and I have been together for 6 years, married for 3. We currently have a bundle of joy on the way. My wife was always on the fence about kids but I was adamant about wanting them, and now that it's becoming so real I'm not sure anymore. I feel like I've just been on autopilot and after spending this whole week buying baby stuff I need to figure it out. Last year my wife and I were at the park and someone yelled at us for speaking in my native language, Korean. My wife is trying to learn too because she's not Korean but wants our baby to be bilingual. We were practicing out loud and sharing a snack and this guy just walks up to us out of nowhere with wild, racist BS. He kicked our food and there was some arguing, and while I was calling the police with my back turned he tried to hit me with a pretty large rock. My wife jumped in between and ended up taking the full force of the hit, which literally busted her forehead open and knocked her out cold for almost a minute. I rushed my wife to the hospital and the guy ran off and was eventually caught by police a few weeks later. My wife needed 14 stitches right across her face, and had 2 black eyes and blood in them. Her face was swollen beyond recognition for a few days too, and when she fell, messed up an old knee injury, so when she got out of the hospital the next day half her face was covered in bandages and she was limping. But she was still cracking jokes in the ER. After the bandages and stitches came out, she was told she would need to wait at least a year before having her scar surgically fixed. But now that the year has almost passed, I've started hinting at her scheduling appointments and such. This entire time I've been struggling with remaining attracted to her despite it. But didn't tell her, since I didn't want to be cruel. She's now saying she doesn't think she wants to get anything done because she wants to save the money for the baby. I've offered to pay for half of it, and she still hasn't really looked into having it done. I've also pushed back her meeting my parents again because of this and bringing her around my friends since it happened. Another part of me is also just sort of mad she even did it. I feel like half of a man now and I've had to delete myself off dating apps before making a mistake and I have been channeling it all at the gym, but every time I look at her I'm reminded of all of those feelings. She hasn't changed a bit besides the scar, she's obviously handled it way better than I did, and somehow it's making me love her less. This, plus the pregnancy. I don't even know what to do. I thought about asking for a hall pass, but I know without a doubt she will leave me. I thought about taking care of my needs on the side so I can be the man she needs me to be, but I know she will eventually find out and she will hate me and make my life hell, or leave me a single father and I will never hear from her again. I just wish it had never happened. I ignored my autistic friend, am I wrong for this? I have really bad social anxiety and I'm a freshman in college. I also have albinism, so I am visually impaired and use various aids such as a bioptic, telescopic glasses, and occasionally a white cane. So, I'm aware that I can be a bit of a spectacle at times. In my government class there are 300 people and lectures are held in a large lecture hall. Because of my eyesight I get preferential seating, which isn't hard to find in that class because there are plenty of seats and no one wants to be up front anyway, lol. This will all be important later. On the first day I met Elle, they slashed them, and I sat down right next to them without saying anything because it was the most convenient place to sit for me. I immediately felt them staring at me because I was wearing my bioptic. The first thing they said to me was, "What you got on your glasses?" I politely explained that I have a disability and that they help me see things that are far away, like the lecture hall screens. After that, it was sort of okay. They're fine to be around, we have some stuff in common and sometimes we'll chat after class about cartoons. The only issue is that they draw a lot of attention to themselves during class. Which draws attention to me because I sit right next to them, in the front row, in the L seat. They consistently blurt out things and make side comments in class to the professor, which leads her to tell Elle to please raise your hand or ask did you have a question? Into her microphone. They also frequently use the center L stairs to dart to and fro to the bathroom during class. They don't turn their cell phone ringer off half the time and whenever they talk to me before class starts it is often too loud. All of this draws ire from the professor and everyone around us to the point where the professor ignores their hand in class and has recently started ignoring mine. I think I'm starting to become outcast by association. Anyway, this brings me to the other day. I am trying to take handwritten notes in class. I have my laptop open to the slides I'm copying and also listening to the lecture. I also have peach rings, which I was being super careful to be quiet with. Elle passes me a note and sets it on my keyboard. The note asks what I'm eating. I quickly scrawl a response and slide it back. I try to motion for them to stop. They begin writing a second message that they put on my laptop. I quickly write a couple words and this time let them grab it back. The third time they write something, it is like 5 lines. I'm done. I text them saying, "Elle, stop. Because this note passing thing is not discreet and everyone behind us, terraced lecture hall, and the professor can see." The third time they put the note on my keyboard, I didn't read it. I just let it sit there. I was still able to use my trackpad, so I kept taking notes. About 10 minutes went by and I guess it became obvious to them that I was not going to respond, so they took the paper back. After class I asked what it said. They said that they wanted to show me something they made. It was a sidewalk chalk drawing of Ice King from Adventure Time.
Have you ever had a first date that gave you the chills? What happened? I'm 29 female, and while I'm well traveled and have been around quite a bit, I do occasionally make some pretty rookie mistakes, my fault, and I make no excuses. I try to remain diligent and alert, but I'm very capable of letting my guard down. So after being here in the United States for about 2 months, I decided that I was bored sitting around my unit watching 90 Day Fiancé, so I decided to make the old dating profiles again. I made no specific intentions known about what I was interested in accomplishing, as I don't really know myself. I just wanted someone to hang out with and see where it goes naturally. I ended up matching with this one bloke who had shared interests with me. We chatted a bit over the app and eventually I felt okay to give him my number. After talking back and forth for a couple of weeks, I agreed to a meetup. We met at a pub and have a couple of drinks. I'll admit at first I didn't recognize him because he didn't resemble his photos to the extent that I was expecting. He didn't look bad by any means, but I could tell that he used older pictures and edited them enough to where he seemed more appealing. I swear I'm not trying to sound superficial, because he was cute, just not what I was expecting. But I also think we've hit a point in social media culture where it's safe to assume that we won't see the same thing in real life as we do online, and that's okay. We did hit it off. We discussed the usual first date stuff, then we got into more detail. I told him about back home and work, and how life was different than here in the States. At one point we were talking and holding hands, and I felt comfortable enough to let him kiss me. Well, he asked me as we were leaving if I wanted to go back to his place for a cup of coffee. I told him I knew what coffee really meant, and that I didn't want to do that on a first date. He assured me it would be 1 cup of coffee and that he would give me a lift home so that I didn't have to call an Uber. I accepted his offer and we walked to his apartment, which was a few blocks away. As we were going upstairs, he made a few questionable remarks. He mentioned how I wasn't like most girls because I accepted his invitation and alluded that, you never know, I could be a psychopath. He then motioned with his eyes down to my dress and inquired about my chest size. I told him again that I was sorry, but the night would not end with him getting lucky. As we got into his unit, he dismissed himself to the toilet and left me sitting on his bed. It was a studio and he didn't have a couch. As I'm sitting there and waiting for him to finish doing whatever he was actually doing, I notice in the corner by his bed that he had 2 masks. One was a cartoon-looking goat mask, and another was a cat. Or maybe a tiger. What was more alarming was that he also had a Bowie knife and a small woodcutter's axe only a short distance away from them. Upon further observation, I also noticed there was a black jumper draped over a dresser. Then on his bedside table, there were a pair of latex gloves. Yawns. Okay, I don't much feel like being murdered tonight. I got up and calmly left the unit, then I hurried down the stairs and down the street, where I was able to catch a lift. Now look, I may have just really hurt his feelings because he had no malicious intent, but if that's all that happened, then I'd prefer that over the possible alternative. All of these items alone wouldn't have been that bad, but all of these random items within a short walk from each other, I'd rather just not chance it. I do feel bad for leaving a person, but I don't feel bad about leaving what could have potentially been a dangerous situation. That along with his random personality change was enough for me to make the call that I made. As of recently I noticed that he either blocked me from Tinder or deleted the app.
Am I the a-hole for getting a paternity test on my son who doesn't look like me? I'm a 29-year-old white guy. My wife is 30 and black. We have 2 kids, a 3-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy. My wife got pregnant with our son early in our relationship. We had only been together a year. We got married because she got pregnant. Fortunately for us, we are actually happy. When my son was born I accepted him as mine. However, I couldn't help noticing how little he looked like me. He is noticeably darker than my wife. He doesn't look half white. My family and friends have asked if I'm sure he's mine. I had doubts, but I initially decided to trust my wife. I loved my son regardless. When our son was 2, my wife had our daughter. I had no doubt she's mine. She looks just like me, she even has my blue eyes. I never realized how powerful it is to know a child is yours. I bonded with her easier because there wasn't the question of paternity dangling over our heads. My family bonded with her faster too. Her resemblance to me convinced me that my son is not mine. I tried to always treat them equally as I see them both as my children. But I realized I was beginning to resent my son. It felt unfair that I had to care for someone else's child. I also began to resent my wife because I felt she had betrayed me. I finally got a paternity test in secret. I was relieved to learn that my son is in fact mine. Genetics are weird. Anyways, that was 4 months ago and my relationship with my wife and son improved dramatically. I feel much closer to him now that I know he's mine. My wife and I have been so happy that we were talking about a third child. I confessed to my wife that I got a paternity test. I hated keeping the secret and I thought she would understand given how much he doesn't look like me. She flipped out. She asked me if I ever doubted our daughter, and when I said no she called me racist. It's not true. I didn't prefer my daughter because of her whiter features, I just knew she was mine. She also said that I made our son feel unloved for no reason for all those years. I said that's bull. Even when I didn't believe my son was mine, I treated him as though he were. My wife says she wants to move out and take our children after the quarantine. It's been about a week and a half and I'm still on the sofa. I hoped she would have calmed down by now but things haven't changed. She's just so furious with me for not trusting her and for in her eyes, denying my son because he's dark. She barely talks to me unless it's about the kids. I don't want to lose my family. Here's where I turn to you, Reddit. Is it so awful that I had doubts? I still took care of him. I don't understand why something like this is wrecking my marriage. I think she is overreacting. So, am I the a-hole? I lost a costume contest to a dog and I became the Hulk. I am genuinely losing my mind here. So I love Halloween. I love making costumes and putting a lot of effort into it. My friend hosted a big Halloween party at her place and said there would be a costume contest for who had the best Halloween costume under $50. Third and second place would win $25, and the first would win $50. It was not a huge money prize, but enough to offset the price of the costume, and to me, it was more about the fun of the game. I wanted to win, so I pulled out all the stops and went as Zorro from One Piece and only had to buy $40 worth of material. When I got to the party, I saw other costumes, and there were some fierce competitors, but I think I had the best costume. Maybe it was too obscure for people who don't know anything about anime, and that might not go well, but it was a good costume. When the winners were announced, I got second. This bummed me out kinda, but hey, I still did well, and again, if I had gone with something more ubiquitous, maybe people would have got it. However, the issue arose when they announced first place. The first place was a dog dressed like a pirate in one of those shitty Party City pirate costumes. So if I had lost to another person, I wouldn't have cared. But I had a few drinks in me, and my inhibitions were lowered, and it was a effing dog. So I out loud asked the host, "Really? The dog won?" And she said yes and was gushing about how cute he looked. I noted that it was a dog, and it didn't even have a say in what was going on. I told her that this didn't seem exactly fair. She told me to lighten up and that it was supposed to be fun. I told her that it was ridiculous she was about to give the $50 prize to the owner for spending $20 on a cheap Walmart dog costume when whoever was in third place actually made our costumes. She got mad that I called her ridiculous, and things kinda escalated into a full-blown argument that required my friend to break us up. I was then kicked out of the party for embarrassing the host. So I don't think I'm the asshole because, obviously, that's not fair. If it was a dog costume contest, but having a bunch of people compete and lose to someone's inbred bulldog is so effing unfair. I think I was justified in saying what I said. People there said I should have just taken the 25 and called it a day.
My fatphobic husband started giving me attention after I lost weight and now I want a divorce. My husband and I have been married for 5 years and we have a 3-year-old together. Pregnancy was stressful but not more than taking care of the child. After having the baby, I struggled a lot with losing the baby's weight and adjusting to being a parent. I looked at the mirror and remembered thinking how disappointed I was in myself. I was trying to figure out a new way of life, but my mood swings and sudden aggression made this nearly impossible. My husband kept commenting about my sudden mood changes and I tried telling him to be patient with me. He did the literal opposite and made me feel bad almost every time after my mood swings were over. But then my husband started making these little comments about my body and how I should start working out and wearing makeup again. It made me feel really awful and I worried that he might start looking elsewhere because we weren't being intimate anymore. He even suggested hiring a nanny so I could have more time for myself, but I wanted to be there for our baby full time, so I turned down the offer. That made him angry and he started acting cold towards me. Months went by without any hugs, kisses, romance or any kind of affection. My self-esteem hit rock bottom. Every time I looked in the mirror, all I saw were the flaws that my husband pointed out. By this point, our son was already 2 years old and I desperately wanted to win my husband back. I thought that if I got in shape again, he would show me love and affection and our marriage would be saved. I craved his attention so much and it hurt to see how much things had changed. But you can't force someone to be affectionate. I took matters into my own hands and hired some help. With more free time, I started going to the gym, taking swimming classes, getting my hair and lashes done regularly and eating healthier. Soon enough, life felt like it used to. Suddenly, my husband started touching me, kissing me, buying me flowers and treating me like the complete opposite of how he treated me before. You'd think that would make me feel better, but for some reason, it made me feel worse. All I could think about were the hurtful things he said to me when I was at my lowest and how cold he was towards me. I get that you can't force attraction, but why couldn't he just hug me or give me a kiss on the cheek even when I was overweight? Why couldn't he love me as a human being and the mother of his child? After reflecting on how he treated me, I got really angry at myself for putting up with his behavior for so long. Last week I told him I wanted a divorce because I didn't think I could move past how badly he treated me. He apologized and promised to change and prove that he could be better. But honestly, I'm not sure if I can trust him again, so I'm going to talk to him soon. My fatphobic husband started giving me attention after I lost weight and now I want a divorce. So I sat down with my husband and had a conversation about what happened. He kept saying that he was sorry, but I asked him if he actually understood why his behavior was hurtful. He just kept saying he was being a jerk, but I felt like he didn't really grasp why it was a problem. So I broke it down for him. I told him that saying I still looked pregnant 3 months after giving birth or calling me a mess because of my dark circles, rolling his eyes when I wanted to show affection, not talking to me for days without any reason and not wanting to spend time together were all really hurtful. And on top of that, he didn't offer to help so I could take care of my mental health. Instead, he wanted me to go to the gym and get in shape. When I reminded him of all this, he couldn't even look me in the eye and didn't say a word. The silence in the room was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. I just don't think he fully understands how badly he treated me. No amount of extra weight can justify that kind of behavior. I wouldn't treat a stranger like that, let alone someone I love. But for the sake of our son, I still offered him couples counseling. And guess what? He refused. He said he was afraid that the therapist and I would team up against him and make things worse. We went round and round in circles, and after almost 3 hours of talking, I finally had enough and told him I wanted a divorce. He tried to convince me that he could prove he could change, but when I asked him how, he just said I had to have faith in him and see it for myself down the line. That's just not good enough for me. I told him I was taking our son to my mom's place for the weekend and that we would discuss everything before finalizing the divorce on Monday. He said okay and we left. But now he won't stop blowing up my phone, begging for a second chance and telling me how much he loves me and how he made a mistake. It's really disheartening to see how much he changed after we had our son. All I ever wanted from him was love, loyalty and respect, but he didn't give me any of that in the past few years. I still wanted to give him a chance, but he doesn't want to put in the work to make things better. If it comes to that, I'll be able to raise our son on my own as I'm financially independent and secure. I also have a lot of help, so it'll be okay. I still want him to be a part of our son's life and be the best daddy he can be, but I can't be with someone who doesn't love or respect me. I wanted to thank you again for all your support and the advice you gave me. I thought my husband was the person I would grow old with, but the universe has other plans for me. It will be really hard to let him go, but I'm hoping it's for the better.
What was your biggest teenage mistake? Shared bank account with girl at 19. I took my uncle's beautiful restored classic car for a drive when I didn't have a license and got it impounded. Having an online relationship with a girl throughout high school who broke up with me after I flew out to visit her. Those were years I could have spent dating the girl I'd had a crush on since 5th grade. I didn't let myself have much fun. I always thought about things like I was already an adult and always had to be responsible and mature. There are a lot of things I passed up that could have been really fun had I just let myself enjoy life a little.
Got sexually harassed at work. Now his daughter says I broke their family. I knew a girl whose father was the boss of a family-owned business. It came out that he was cheating on his partner and mother of his children, with a girl who was around 17. She actually wasn't much older than one of his daughters. His partner was devastated and the girl he cheated with actually taunted her and the kids for a while, even after she was let go. From what I heard, it wasn't his first time cheating and he had a history of creepy behavior around female employees. And while no one was fond of the girl he cheated with, as she did have a history of intentionally sleeping with other people's partners and bragging about it, most people were more angry at the guy than the girl. BC again, she was almost the same age as his daughter. In retrospect, I myself think the girl he had an affair with was probably groomed, maybe even worse, all her life and essentially brainwashed into thinking any of this was normal and that stealing any man was some sort of flex. But, needless to say, the man's family hadn't had the same kind of respect for him again. And his daughter once told me she was way angrier at her dad than the girl because she herself had been sexually harassed by older men, including when she was young, and so she wondered why it never crossed her dad's mind how he would have felt if someone had done the same thing to her. So, she was pretty much disgusted that her father could do such a thing. That's why I think that the man who harassed you is the one at fault for his family falling apart, not you. And his daughter is misdirecting her anger at you, as we are failing to realize her father did horrible things that do have consequences. Ni day. She might likewise realize what's so creepy about her father's behavior. What's the best joke you have ever heard? Peter goes into a pharmacy and says to the pharmacist, "Hello, could you give me a rubber? I'm going to my girlfriend's place for dinner and I think I might have a chance." The pharmacist gives him the rubber, and as Peter was going out he returns and says, "Give me another rubber because my girlfriend's sister is very cute too. She always crosses her legs in a provocative manner when she sees me and I think I might strike a luck there too." The pharmacist gives him a second rubber, and as Peter was leaving again, he turns back and says, "Give me one more rubber because my girlfriend's mom is still pretty cute and when she sees me she always makes eye contact, and since she invited me for dinner I think she is expecting me to make a move." During dinner, Peter sat with his girlfriend on the left, the sister on his right and the mom facing him. When the dad walks in, Peter lowers his head and starts the dinner prayer. "Dear Lord, bless this dinner and thank you for all you've given us." 10 minutes later, Peter was still praying, "Thank you Lord for your kindness." 10 more minutes go by, and Peter is still praying, keeping his head down, very close to the table. They all looked at each other surprised, and his girlfriend was even more surprised than others. She got close to him and whispered, "I didn't know you were so religious." Peter, with his head still on the table, replies, "I never knew your dad was a pharmacist." My wife spent my birthday out with her friends. I've posted here many times about issues I've had with my wife, most commonly with regards to her subservience to her best friend turned sister-in-law. She's promised to try and work on this, given how much it's impacted our marriage, but today I think we passed the point of no return. You see, today is my birthday. It's past midnight now though. This morning my daughter, who is nearly 4, gave me huge hugs and kisses, which was great. My wife gave me a card, and told me that my gift hadn't arrived in the post yet. My suspicion is that she's yet to order it, or ordered it late, whatever it may be. I then logged into my work, and did my shift like any other day. My wife was off work while my daughter was at my mum's for a visit. Nothing special was planned for the evening, because there were plans in place already, just that those plans didn't include me. Sister-in-law and a couple of my wife's other friends had arranged to go out for dinner and drinks, because a voucher sister-in-law had for a particular restaurant expired soon, and my birthday was the only date they could all make. Crappy, right? Gets better though, because my wife made a big social media post wishing me a happy birthday, saying how crap it was that I had to work all night on my birthday. A complete lie, but it does make her look less bad in public for not spending my birthday with me. The issue is, because she's done this, I now couldn't make plans with friends or family without exposing her lie. So yeah, great birthday. When I think about how she'd react if I had pulled half the crap she has pulled, I can't see it ending any other way than me getting screamed at, even though she's chosen to spend my birthday with sister-in-law instead of me. On the plus side, I did some Warhammer painting after I collected my daughter and played with her a bit before bed. She also asked why mummy wasn't here, which kind of crushed me. Am I wrong to be annoyed about this? My landlord was watching me through a peephole, so I blinded him. I reached the end of my rope when it came to dealing with abusive, perverted men. And I'm happy I made at least one of these types of men pay for his behavior and suffer for it for the rest of his life. If I could do it all again, I would in a heartbeat. I'm a 22-year-old female college student. I recently moved into a new apartment after escaping an abusive relationship. We lived together and I was being hurt physically on a daily basis. I knew I needed to get out fast. So I signed a lease for the first place I could afford. Like I said, I'm a college student, so I couldn't afford a very nice place on my own. I moved into a crappy little rundown apartment building. When I first met my landlord, I thought something seemed off about him. He seemed like a really weird old man. I could have never guessed just how perverted and effed up this man actually was. I found out after I signed the lease that he actually lives in the unit right next to mine. And a couple of times I've seen him in the hall. He always stares at me without blinking or saying a word. I uncovered an ugly truth about my apartment this week, and I wish I never moved into this awful unit. I was in my bathroom blowing out my hair after a shower when I noticed a hole drilled in the wall about the size of a dime. I can't believe I never noticed it before. It's right next to my shower. I looked into it and saw an eye staring back at me. I realized the hole had been drilled in the wall I shared with my landlord, and I started shaking as I realized I must have been being watched by him for God knows how long now, maybe since I moved it. Of course, I wanted to call the cops to pack my stuff up right there. But honestly, times are so rough right now and I do not have the means to move right now, let alone afford a whole new place. I had enough of men harassing me, abusing me and using me. This incident made a switch flip in my brain, and instead of calling the cops, I decided to take revenge into my own hands. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a college student and I happen to be a chemistry major, so I have access to a full lab of dangerous chemicals. The next day while I was on campus, I loaded a special type of spray bottle with a small amount of sulfuric acid. I knew I was going far with my revenge, but I didn't care in the slightest. I knew this old pervert deserved to pay. The next time I took a shower, I acted normal. I didn't care that he was certainly watching me. It would be the last thing he ever saw with that eye. Halfway through my shower, I quickly lined up the spray bottle of acid with the peephole and pulled the trigger. I immediately heard my landlord scream and collapse on the other side of the wall. I laughed to myself and he kept screaming and screaming. Finally, my other neighbors called the ambulance after all the screaming, and we all gathered outside to watch them take him away on the stretcher. Before he was bandaged up, I saw blood leaking from his burned eye. His eye looked like a bloody raisin sitting in his eye socket. I made conversation with the EMT and asked if my landlord was going to be alright. The EMT said he'd be fine, but he would bet money that he had totally lost that eye. I had to restrain myself from smiling, and I just hope he comes home and looks through the people with the other eye.
What brand do you automatically associate with being bad? Anything the Kardashians/Jenners try to sell, including their products. They're all snake oil salesmen. My fiancé swore that their tequila had been winning blind taster tests and demanded that I buy a bottle. Utter trash 0/10. Wouldn't under any circumstance. Perhaps they misinterpreted this. Alcohol makes you go blind if you taste it.
How I became a Sigma male. I am 17 years old and have always been kind of nerdy, into books and in general a smart kid. However, I lacked the ability to be confrontational and hold my ground and got bullied as a kid. My dad would laugh at me for not being manly enough and would often say I should have been born a girl as I am as soft as a cookie. I finally decided to do some research about testosterone and its impacts. I went to get my testosterone tested and found out it was 325 nanograms/dl, a very low amount. This was the reason I was so girly according to my father. I started to hit the gym consistently and eating right. Within a year my test was up to 500 nanograms/dl. It was good but not great enough. My dad started complimenting me, telling me I am becoming the manly son he has always wanted. I started to stand up for myself and developed a crush on a really cute girl. I asked her out but she rejected me, not for a specific reason however. I was bummed. Then I went online and researched ways to increase my test even more. I then stumbled upon a supplement called the Kingmaker. I started taking it and the results were great. My numbers in the gym increased, my sleep quality improved, and I was feeling more confident in general. I continued my journey towards masculinity and another 6 months later got tested again. Now I was at a whopping 830 nanograms/dl. Long gone was this skinny, frail kid afraid of confrontation. I now thought of myself as a true man, a true Sigma male. It got to the point where I would bang out 100 push-ups before starting my day. Girls started to notice and I became the guy that girls would compliment. They would remark about my arms or tell me I looked good today. One girl even told me to my face that she wanted to be railed by me till kingdom come. I went to ask my crush out again, with no fear. She said she will go on a date. I asked her why she had changed her mind. She told me over these last few months she has seen me get in amazing shape, lose the nerd glasses and become more social and attractive in her eyes. We went on a dinner date and I paid. I was determined on doing her that night come hell or high water. We went back to her place and we had a mind-blowing time. I was in so deep not even King Arthur could have pulled me out, and oh boy was it grippy. My newfound testosterone was unleashing onto her and she was left in a state of the leg shakes. Fast forward 2 months and she is now my girlfriend and gym partner. Have you ever had to lie to save your life? If I don't call my mom right now, she'll call the cops. Some background. My mother devised a system of code words and numbers that if used in certain ways meant different things. My older brothers would sometimes party with their friends in some not so great areas, so there were things that could be texted or said over the phone that saved them from bad situations. Maybe a rival gang showed up, the cops showed up, or there were unknown substances on the scene. Hey, we've all smoked a little Zaza. The words were, breakfast sausages, kitty litter, tampon/pad/period, any could be used, ice cream, garbage, recycling. The numbers were 1 to 10. Breakfast sausages at 10? Meant something is happening here and I feel unsafe. My mom would question, does that work for do you need me to come get you? Yes meant she came, no meant she alerted the cops who would usually just drive by. So, how did this help me? I was at a party where a guy was very insistent on getting me alone, and much bigger than I was. Upon getting me into a bedroom alone, he proceeded to push me down on the bed, and get on top of me. Over the noise of the party, screaming wasn't working so I struggled, kicking and wiggling. When he grabbed my hair and yanked me up, I caught an old school alarm clock familiar red numbers and then started freaking out. Oh my god it's so late I'm going to be effing killed. He stopped for a second, confused, and I said I need to call my mom right now or she'll call the cops. I was supposed to be home an hour ago. Immediately he was off of me and my phone was in my hand. No one wants cops at a party. My exchange with my mom went a little something like this. Hey mom, super sorry that it's so late. I hope I didn't worry you. I lost track of time. I thought you were going to stay with Teresa tonight after your party? Oh crap yeah mom, I'll switch out the kitty litter tomorrow by 9. I'll make sure I'm dropped off early so it's done before the garbage is collected. Can you grab me some tampons at the store tomorrow? My would-be assailant is looking rather uncomfortable. I'll throw on a robe and be there in 5. Be ready for me to scream. My mom proceeded to yell some rather nonsensical things at me over the phone, as I'd requested with tampons. Garbage was that whoever I was concerned about was near me, potentially being able to hear the phone conversation or read texts. Kitty litter meant I needed to leave ASAP. 9 meaning without cops. My would-be assailant was very uncomfortable and I left the room without a word, my mom yelling on the phone, and an overly exaggerated wince on my face. I reconnected with my friend and told her what happened. She walked me out with her boyfriend and ended up telling me that the same guy had told her he thought we'd really connected and wanted my info. In the end, I lied, but I would have been assaulted if I hadn't. It's a system I'm glad to pass on to my daughter. Parents, how did your kid become a disappointment? My 19-year-old daughter failed in her first semester of college. Not a big deal. Sometimes freshmen get overwhelmed and don't do so hot in their classes. My daughter, however, just decided to not show up to the classes that weren't theater related. So she failed math and English, which she could have aced. Now, had she owned up to this, there would have been little issue. Lesson learned, do better on probation and pass the classes next semester. What she did do was just not register for classes for the next semester and try her luck at living in the dorms, illegally. Somehow it took the college 3 months to catch up with her. She finally fessed up, in March. By that time, she had been trespassing at the college for those 3 months. We had to beg the college to not throw her into prison. We were literally on the phone with college officials for an hour begging them to just let her come home. She screwed up but she's learned her lesson. Luckily, if you can call it that, her grandmother rushed to her rescue and paid off her outstanding balance on her bill, $6,000 for the 3 months she lived on campus, boarding and food card. Her grandmother, my mom, then proceeded to tell my daughter she never had to return to us. We were evil people and she would protect her from the likes of us. My daughter, who used to call me every night and called me any time she had problems, cut all ties with us because facing her responsibilities wasn't a requirement anymore. We tried calling her, tried telling her we weren't angry and to just come home. Nothing doing. We would have been angry, but we would have worked it out. Instead, we became the bad guys in her fairy tale, and for the past 5 months, she's gone on shopping sprees, goofed off, and had the time of her life. I've seen her twice since it all happened. Both times she treated me like an evil monster. Both times I went home in tears, despising my mother more and more. My daughter is going back to school tomorrow like nothing ever happened. My beach is paying for it. You might be thinking, be grateful she's footing the bill. The problem with that is my oldest daughter has worked her butt off to get her degree, and my mom refused to help her because she's bi. She's doing this to get back at her for embarrassing her in front of her church. I refused to let the younger daughter get help from her because of this in the past, so my younger daughter also stabbed her older sister in the back by doing this. I'm so very disappointed in the entitled brat my daughter has become, and if I ever see my beach of a mother again, I'll wring her fat neck, right in front of all those Christians in her church.